Millionaire comes home and sees his elderly parents in the rain. What he does leaves everyone speechless. Marcus Sterling felt his heart tighten as he turned the corner of the street where his mansion stood. There was something strange about that stormy night, something that shouldn't be there. As he approached the electronic gate, the businessman slammed on the brakes. Sitting on the wet sidewalk, completely soaked by the merciless rain, were two figures he hadn't seen in 5 years. His parents. Arthur and Elizabeth Sterling were hugging each other, shivering, with an old leather suitcase beside them. The woman was coughing hard while her husband tried to shield her with his own body against the storm. "My God," Marcus murmured, his hands freezing on the steering wheel. Martha, the maid, had followed his orders to the letter. The order given years ago when he swore never to let those people cross the door of his house again. The order that now made him feel a crushing weight in his chest. The car window was fogged up, but Marcus could clearly see the scene unfolding before him. His father, in his dark blue flannel shirt completely plastered to his thin body by the water, kept his arms around his wife. His mother, in a simple grey blouse, had her face buried in her husband's shoulder. Both seemed to have aged decades in the last few years. Marcus couldn't get out of the car. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles were white. Memories flooded his mind like the rain that pounded the asphalt. He remembered the day he found out, the day everything collapsed. 5 years ago, Marcus had arrived at his parents' old house for a surprise visit. He found an eviction notice on the door. Not just any notice, but the final one. The house where he grew up, where he learned to walk, where he spent his entire childhood and adolescence, was being taken by the bank. When he confronted his father, Arthur confessed that he had sold the house months earlier and used the money to pay off debts Marcus didn't even know existed. "What debts?" Marcus had shouted that day, his voice echoing through the empty walls of the living room. "What debts could possibly be worth our house?" Arthur didn't answer. He just lowered his head, that proud and stubborn way he always had. Elizabeth cried silently in the corner of the room, her hands trembling. "You destroyed everything," Marcus continued out of control. "Everything you built, everything we had. And you didn't even have the courage to tell me." "Son, I can explain." Arthur tried, but Marcus cut him off. "Don't call me son. A real father wouldn't hide something like that. A real father wouldn't sell the family house without telling anyone." Those were the last words they exchanged. Marcus left that house and never returned. He changed his cell phone number. He blocked his parents on everything. When they showed up at his new mansion, he instructed Martha not to open the gate. It was as if Arthur and Elizabeth had ceased to exist. But now they were there, in the rain, completely helpless. Marcus finally managed to open the car door. The sound of the storm invaded the quiet interior of the luxury vehicle. He took a few steps, the rain soaking his bespoke suit in seconds. His parents hadn't seen him yet. They were too wrapped up in each other, lost in their own world of suffering. "Dad." The word came out before Marcus could think, a word he swore he'd never say again. Arthur slowly lifted his head. His eyes, the same brown eyes Marcus had inherited, were red, not just from the rain, but from tears. Elizabeth also looked up, and Marcus saw something that broke him in half. Shame. Pure, devastating shame. "Marcus," Elizabeth whispered, her voice almost inaudible in the noise of the storm. We didn't want to bother." "Bother?" Marcus felt anger mixed with something he couldn't identify. "You're sitting in the rain in front of my house." Arthur began to stand up, his legs trembling. The old man couldn't have been more than 65, but he looked 80. Marcus noticed how his father's hands trembled, how slow and careful his movements were. "We're leaving now, son," Arthur said, picking up the old suitcase. "We didn't come to ask for anything. We just wanted to see you from afar, to know you're okay." "See from afar?" Marcus looked around, confused. "You're sitting on my sidewalk. It's just—" Elizabeth coughed hard before continuing. We don't have any more." The sentence died in another coughing fit, a deep cough coming from the chest, making the woman's frail body double over. Marcus felt something moving inside him, something he had tried to suffocate for 5 whole years. He looked at his parents, really looked, and saw what he didn't want to see, or what. The clothes weren't just old, they were the only ones they had. The suitcase wasn't full of belongings, it was almost empty. His father's shoes had holes, his mother's hands were rough and bruised. "Come in," Marcus said, his voice coming out hoarse. "No, son, we don't want to," Arthur began. "I said come in," Marcus practically shouted. "You're going to catch pneumonia." The electronic gate opened with a buzz. Marcus took the old suitcase from his father's hand and started walking toward the house. Arthur and Elizabeth exchanged glances, then followed slowly, as if they were walking on sacred ground they didn't deserve to tread. Martha opened the door, her eyes wide with surprise. She was a woman in her mid-40s working for Marcus for 3 years. She knew the rules about the boss's parents. "Mr. Marcus," she began, "prepare the guest room." Marcus cut in, without looking at her. "And call the doctor, now." Martha hesitated only a second before running upstairs. Marcus led his parents to the living room, that enormous room with high ceilings, a marble fireplace, and furniture that cost more than cars. Elizabeth looked at everything with a mixture of admiration and sadness. "Sit down." Marcus pointed to the leather sofa. "We're wet, son," Arthur said. "We'll ruin your furniture. Sit." The tone left no room for argument. The 2 elderly people sat on the edge of the sofa, so uncomfortable they looked like they were sitting on nails. Marcus stood, dripping water onto the oriental rug, not exactly sure what to do or say. The silence was deafening. Only the sound of rain hitting the large windows and Elizabeth's labored breathing filled the space. "How long?" Marcus finally asked. "What?" Arthur looked up. "How long have you been like this?" There was a long pause. Arthur looked at Elizabeth, who kept her eyes fixed on the floor. 8 months, Arthur admitted, his voice low. "Since we were evicted from the last place we were living." "Evicted?" Marcus felt his stomach turn. "Where were you living?" "In a rented little room, near the Central Market," Elizabeth replied, still not looking at her son. "But the owner raised the rent and we couldn't afford it." "And since then?" Silence. "Dad, since then what?" "Shelters," Arthur finally said, the word coming out like a painful confession. "We went through 3 different shelters, but they only let you stay for a few weeks. Then we have to leave to make room for others." Marcus felt his legs weaken. He pulled up a chair and sat down heavily. "You were living in shelters?" His voice was just a whisper now. "For 8 months? Sometimes we managed to stay at acquaintances' houses for a few days," Elizabeth added quickly, as if that made the situation better. "Mrs. Higgins, remember her, the old neighbor? She let us stay for a week, and your cousin Derek also helped us for a few days, but—" Marcus ran his hands through his wet hair. "You have relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins. Why didn't you ask for help?" The 2 elderly people exchanged glances again. It was Arthur who always answered. That was his role in the family, the protector, the one who made the tough decisions. "Because," he hesitated, "because we didn't want people to know. We didn't want to tarnish your reputation, Marcus. You're successful, respected. If they found out your parents were living in shelters—" "My reputation?" Marcus felt the anger returning. "You refused to ask for help because you were worried about my reputation?" "You worked so hard to build what you have," Elizabeth said, finally looking at her son. "We couldn't ruin that. People talk, son. They say you don't take care of your parents, that you're ungrateful, that—" "And am I not?" Marcus interrupted, his voice bitter. "Isn't that exactly what I am? An ungrateful son who let his parents live on the street?" "No." Arthur stood up, surprised by his own speed. "You're not ungrateful. You're angry at me, and you have every right. I'm the one who ruined everything. I'm the one who made bad decisions." "What decisions?" Marcus also stood. "You never told me, you never explained what debts were worth selling our house." "Because," Arthur swallowed hard, "because it was my responsibility, my mistake." "Mistake about what? Gambling? Loans from loan sharks? What?" Martha appeared at the living room door, saving everyone from the tense moment. "Mr. Marcus, I've prepared the bedroom. The doctor said he'll be here in 20 minutes. "Thank you, Martha." Marcus took a deep breath. "Please take my parents there, and set aside some dry clothes from my wardrobe." "Yes, sir." Martha made a gentle gesture for the two elderly people to follow her. Elizabeth stood up with difficulty, leaning on Arthur. Marcus noticed how his mother limped slightly. "Mom, are you hurt?" "Just tired, son," Elizabeth answered quickly. "Nothing serious." But Marcus saw the exchange of glances between his parents. There was something they weren't telling him, something beyond the obvious situation. When he was alone in the living room, Marcus walked to the large window. The rain was still coming down hard. He looked at his reflection in the glass. A 42-year-old man, hair beginning to grey at the temples, designer suit soaked through. A successful man. A respected businessman. A son who let his parents live on the street. The thought was like a knife. Marcus closed his eyes, but the image of the two of them hugging on the sidewalk was etched on his eyelids. How could he not have noticed? How could he not have known? "Because you didn't want to know," a voice answered in his mind. "You cut them off completely. Changed your number. Didn't answer their letters, told everyone to keep them away. Mr. Marcus?" Martha's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Sorry to bother you, but I need to show you something." Marcus turned around. Martha was holding an old shoebox. "What's that?" Martha looked uncomfortable. "Every month, your parents showed up at the gate. I always sent them away as you ordered, but they left things, small packages. I kept them, didn't know what to do with them." Marcus took the box from Martha's hands. It was heavier than it looked. He opened it slowly. Inside were gifts, small handmade gifts, a crocheted scarf, a clearly handcrafted wooden picture frame, a little notebook with a decorated cover, envelopes, many envelopes. Marcus picked one up. It was addressed to him in his mother's shaky handwriting. He opened it and began to read. "Dear Marcus, today is your birthday. You turn 40. I remember when you were born, so tiny and perfect. Your father cried with joy. I know you don't want to see us, and we respect that. But we couldn't let your day pass without at least trying to send you our love. We're fine, don't worry. Just know that we have always loved you and always will, no matter what. With all our love, Mom." The date on the envelope was from 2 years ago. Marcus picked up another birthday, more words of love. More reassurances that they were fine. Lies, he realized now. Lies to protect him. He opened envelope after envelope. Birthdays, Christmas, Father's Day, Mother's Day. All the important holidays. All with short, loving messages, never asking for anything. Just saying they loved him. At the bottom of the box, Marcus found something that made him stop breathing. It was a baby blanket. Hand-knitted with a delicate star pattern, there was a note pinned to it. "For our grandson Ethan, whom we would so love to meet. With love, Grandma Elizabeth and Grandpa Arthur." Marcus dropped the box to the floor. Martha stepped forward, worried. "Mr. Marcus." "They know," Marcus whispered. "They know about Ethan." "How could they know? You never—" "I don't know." Marcus picked up the blanket, his fingers tracing the careful stitches. "But they do, and I never gave them a chance to meet him." Ethan was 8 years old, Marcus's only child. A bright, curious boy who always asked about his grandparents. Marcus always said they lived far, far away. Another lie. One more in the pile of lies he had built. "Where is Ethan?" Marcus asked suddenly. "In his room, I believe, doing his homework." "Tell him—" Marcus stopped, thinking. "No, don't say anything yet. I need to think." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The doctor arrived half an hour later, a middle-aged man, efficient and discreet. Marcus led him to the guest room where his parents were. Arthur had changed clothes and was now wearing one of Marcus's casual suits, far too large on his thin frame. Elizabeth was in a bathrobe, her grey hair still damp. The doctor examined them both in silence, asking basic questions. Marcus leaned against the wall, observing. That's when he noticed something he hadn't seen before. His mother's hands. They were not just rough, but had deep calluses from hard labor. "Doctor, you can speak in front of them," Marcus said, when the doctor motioned to take him into the hallway. The doctor nodded and adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Elizabeth has the beginnings of pneumonia. Nothing serious yet, but she needs absolute rest and medication." He paused. "I also noticed signs of malnutrition, not severe but concerning." Malnutrition? Marcus felt his blood run cold. "Additionally, she has an infection in her feet that needs treatment. They look like infected blisters, likely from walking too much." Elizabeth didn't look at her son. She kept her eyes fixed on her own hands. "And my father? Mr. Arthur is doing better, but also shows signs of malnutrition. He has a cardiac arrhythmia that needs monitoring. Nothing life-threatening immediately, but he needs follow-up," Marcus finished. "Exactly, I'll prescribe the necessary medications." The doctor picked up his briefcase. "But honestly, Mr. Marcus, what they need most is rest, proper food, and a safe place. Everything else is just maintenance." After the doctor left, Marcus stood still in the hallway. Martha came up the stairs with a tray of food. "I made some soup," she said. "I thought it would be easier on their stomachs." "Thank you, Martha." Marcus touched her arm. "And thank you for keeping that box. You didn't have to do that." "I know, sir," Martha said with a sad smile. "But they were your parents. And every time they came here, I saw the love in their eyes. I couldn't just throw it away." Marcus entered the room. Arthur was sitting in an armchair near the window, watching the rain. Elizabeth was lying in bed, her eyes closed, but Marcus knew she wasn't asleep. "They brought food," he said. "We don't want to be more trouble than we already are," Arthur replied, without taking his eyes off the window. "You're not intruding." "Of course we are." For the first time, there was anger in Arthur's voice. "We show up at your door, soaked like beggars, and you felt obligated to take us in out of pity." "It wasn't pity, no?" Arthur finally looked at him. "Then what was it, Marcus?" 5 years. 5 years without a word, without a phone call, without anything. And suddenly, because you run into us in the rain, everything is forgiven. I never said it was forgiven." "Then why are we here?" The question hung in the air. Marcus had no answer. Or he did, but he couldn't put it into words. "Because," he tried, "because you're my parents." "Are we?" Arthur stood up. "Because for the past 5 years we didn't seem to mean anything to you. You sold our house," Marcus exploded. "You made the most important decision and didn't even consult me. You just sold the house where I grew up." "I know," Arthur shouted back. "I know I did something terrible, but you wouldn't even let me explain. You didn't want to hear it." "Then explain now." Marcus stepped forward. "Explain what those debts were. Explain why paying them off was more important than keeping our house, our history." Arthur opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Elizabeth, who was now sitting on the bed, tears quietly streaming down her face. Arthur began. "I can't." "Can't? Or won't?" "I can't," Arthur repeated, his voice breaking. "Please, Marcus, don't ask me that." "Dad!" "No!" The old man raised his hands. Some secrets are too heavy to share, especially with our children." Marcus felt tears burning his eyes, tears of frustration, of anger, of something that felt dangerously like wounded love. "How do you expect me to understand if you won't tell me anything?" "We don't expect you to understand." Elizabeth spoke for the first time, her voice weak but steady. "We never did. We only hoped. We hoped that one day you could forgive us, even without understanding. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, son." Elizabeth lay down again. "We learned that the hard way." Marcus left the room before he could say something he'd regret. He practically ran down the stairs and went out into the garden, even though the rain was still falling. He let the cold water wash away the tears that finally fell. Why did it have to be so hard? Why couldn't they just explain? Why all this mystery around damn debts? He stood there, in the rain, until he felt someone tugging his arm. It was Ethan, his son, holding an umbrella far too big for him. "Dad, what are you doing out here? What are you doing out?" Marcus quickly wiped his face and accepted the shelter of the umbrella. "Just needed some air, champ. Martha said we have visitors." Ethan looked toward the house. "Who are they?" Marcus hesitated. It was the moment of truth. Keep lying, or finally tell the truth. "They're—" He took a deep breath. "They're your grandparents." Ethan's eyes widened. "My grandparents, but you said they lived far away." "I said a lot of things, Ethan. A lot of wrong things. Can I meet them?" The question was so innocent, so full of hope, that Marcus felt his heart break a little more. "Not today, they're very tired, but yes, soon." Ethan smiled, that wide smile that lit up his whole face. He had the same smile as Elizabeth, Marcus realized. How had he never noticed that before? That night, after putting Ethan to bed, Marcus sat in his study. It was a room he liked, with bookshelves, a fireplace, and a large mahogany desk. He opened the bottom drawer and took out an old folder. Documents from the sale of his parents' house. He had never really read through everything. He had been too angry at the time. But now, he forced himself to read every word. The house had been sold for a fair price. The money was transferred to pay off a loan, a big loan. From a medical clinic. Medical clinic. Marcus picked up the phone and made a few calls. He had contacts, people who owed him favors. Within half an hour, he had the information he was looking for. The loan was taken out 17 years ago, to pay for medical treatment, experimental treatment, not covered by health insurance, extremely expensive. 17 years ago, Marcus was 25. That was when he got sick, very sick. The doctors said it was a rare type of cancer. The chances of survival were minimal with conventional treatment. But there was a private clinic in Chicago that offered a new treatment, experimental, expensive, ridiculously expensive. Marcus remembered being in the hospital, weak and scared, when his father walked into the room with a huge smile. "Great news, son," Arthur said. "You're going to get the treatment, the best treatment. We'll take care of this." "But Dad, it costs a fortune." "Don't worry about that, I'll handle it. You just focus on getting better." And Marcus got better. The treatment worked. It was tough, painful, but it worked. He survived. He built a life, a career, a family, and he never asked how his father paid for it all. Marcus's hands trembled as he held the documents. The loan was spread out over 15 years. 15 years of monthly payments that probably bled the family's finances dry. And when they finally finished paying, Arthur and Elizabeth had nothing left. The house was the last thing they had to sell. "They sold the house," Marcus whispered to the empty office. "They sold the house to pay for the rest of the treatment that saved my life." The revelation hit him like a freight train. All this time of anger and resentment. And the truth was that his parents had sacrificed everything for him. Literally everything. Marcus let the papers fall and buried his face in his hands. The sobs came then, deep and uncontrollable. Tears of remorse, of shame, of a pain so intense it felt physical. How could he have been so blind? How could he not have seen it, not asked, not tried to understand? He cried until he had no tears left. Then he wiped his face and went upstairs. He stopped in front of the guest room. The light was off. He could hear Elizabeth's occasional cough from inside. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he would have the conversation he should have had 5 years ago. Tomorrow he would start fixing what he had broken. But before going to his own room, Marcus stopped at Ethan's room. The boy was fast asleep, clutching a stuffed dinosaur. Marcus gently kissed his son's forehead and whispered, "Tomorrow you're going to meet your grandparents, champ. For real." The morning arrived clear and cold. The storm had passed, leaving everything clean and fresh. Marcus woke up early with a knot in his stomach. He dressed carefully and went downstairs to the kitchen. Martha was already there, making breakfast. "How are my parents?" were the first words out of his mouth. Mrs. Elizabeth slept poorly. The cough kept up all night. Mr. Arthur stayed awake taking care of her. Martha replied, worry clear in her voice. I took them tea early. Prepare a hearty breakfast, Marcus said. They need to eat well. When breakfast was ready, Marcus personally carried the tray to his parents' room. He knocked softly on the door. Come in. Arthur's voice sounded tired. Marcus entered. Elizabeth was propped up on several pillows, her face pale. Arthur was sitting beside the bed, still wearing the clothes from the day before. Dad, didn't you sleep? I slept, Arthur lied, and Marcus knew it was a lie. Just woke up early. Marcus set the tray on a small table. I brought breakfast. He pulled up a chair and sat down. And I need to talk to you. Marcus, we've talked enough, Arthur began. As soon as your mother feels a little better, we'll... I know, Marcus interrupted. I know about the treatment. Arthur froze. Elizabeth slowly closed her eyes. I know you sold the house to pay for the loan for my treatment, Marcus continued, his voice trembling. I know you spent everything to save me. Marcus, Elizabeth began, why didn't you tell me? The tears returned, hot and painful. Why didn't you say anything? Arthur stood up and walked to the window. Because, he paused, because you didn't need to carry that guilt. You were our son. You were sick. There was no debate about what to do. We would do it all over again 100 times if necessary. But the house, it was just a house, Marcus, Elizabeth said softly. You were our life, our joy, our reason for existing. How could we not do everything in our power to save you? But now you've lost everything. We haven't lost anything. Arthur turned to his son. You are alive, healthy, successful. You have a beautiful son. That's everything. That was always everything. Marcus stood up and hugged his father. Arthur stiffened for a moment, surprised. Then his arms wrapped around his son. It was the first hug in 5 years. I'm sorry, Marcus sobbed. I'm sorry for everything, for being so selfish, for not asking, for cutting you out of our lives. Son, Arthur was crying now too. There's nothing to forgive. Yes, there is. There's a lot to forgive. Marcus pulled back. But I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it. Elizabeth was also crying, silent tears sliding down her face. Marcus went to her and took her rough hands. Mom, I saw the blanket for Ethan. Elizabeth smiled through her tears. You don't know how many nights I lay awake, imagining what our grandson would be like. If he would look like you when you were little, if he would have your smile. He has your smile, Mom. Marcus kissed her hands. And he's going to meet you today, for real, as the wonderful grandmother you are. But Marcus, Arthur began, we don't want him to see us like this, so worn out. Worn out? Marcus shook his head. You're not worn out. You're survivors, fighters, and I want my son to know the grandparents who sacrificed everything for love, because that's who you are, pure love. There was a knock at the door. It was Ethan, already dressed for school, but clearly not intending to go. Dad? He peeked through the door. Can I come in? Marcus looked at his parents, who nodded. Ethan entered timidly, his big eyes fixed on the two elderly people. Ethan, these are your grandparents. Marcus took his son's hand. Arthur and Elizabeth. Ethan took a few hesitant steps toward the bed. He looked at Elizabeth, studying her face. You have the same eyes as the grandma in my photo, he said suddenly. The photo my dad keeps in the drawer, I saw it once. Marcus was surprised. He didn't know Ethan had found that old photo. You look a lot like your father when he was your age, Elizabeth said, her voice full of emotion. A lot, really. Really? Ethan smiled. Can I give you a hug? Elizabeth opened her arms and Ethan practically jumped onto the bed, hugging his grandmother with all the strength of his 8 years. Arthur also approached, placing his hand on his grandson's shoulder. I've always wanted to have grandparents, Ethan said, his face buried in Elizabeth's shoulder. All the kids at school have them, and now I do too. Marcus had to leave the room. The emotion was too much. He leaned against the hallway wall, trying to compose himself. Martha appeared with a handkerchief. It's a good day, Mr. Marcus, she said gently. It is. Marcus wiped his eyes. Finally. The following weeks were a period of adjustment. Elizabeth improved with the medication and care. The cough lessened, her strength slowly returned. Arthur also grew stronger, regular meals working wonders. Marcus insisted they stay at the mansion, but he could feel his parents' discomfort. They weren't used to all that luxury. They felt like intruders in a world that wasn't theirs. It was Ethan who suggested the solution. "Dad, why can't Grandma and Grandpa live in the pool house?" The pool house was a separate building on the property, originally planned as a guest house, but it was being used only for storage. "It's small, but it has 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a living room," Ethan continued, excited. They could live there. That way they'd be close but have their own space. The idea was perfect. Marcus hired a crew to renovate the space. In 2 weeks the house was ready, modern yet cozy, with adaptations for his parents' age, handrails, slip-resistant flooring, proper lighting. When Marcus took his parents to see it, they were speechless. "Marcus, this is too much," Arthur began. "It's not too much," Marcus cut him off. "It's the least I can do. You're going to live here, close to us, but with your privacy and dignity." "But son, we can't afford—" "I'm not asking you to pay anything. This is my gift to you. For all the years you gave me everything." Elizabeth cried, of course. She seemed to cry at anything lately. But they were happy tears, tears of relief and gratitude. Ethan helped his grandparents move, which didn't take long since they had very few belongings. Marcus provided new clothes, furniture, everything they needed. "How can I help them more?" Marcus asked one night, during dinner at the main house. It was a new tradition, having dinner together 3 times a week. "You've already done too much," Arthur replied. "I haven't," Marcus insisted. "Do you need anything else? Want to travel? Visit someplace?" "Actually," Elizabeth hesitated, "there's something I'd really like." "Whatever it is, Mum." "I'd like to go back to work." Marcus blinked, surprised. "Work?" "Not for money," Elizabeth explained quickly. "But I've always worked. I've always done something useful. Being idle makes me restless." "Me too," Arthur added. "I've worked my whole life. I don't know how to do nothing." Marcus thought for a moment. "Dad, you were a teacher, right? Of math?" "For 40 years. I retired just before everything happened." "And you, Mum?" "I worked with crafts, sold them at fairs. It wasn't much, but I loved doing it." Marcus had an idea that could be good for everyone. "What if—" He paused, formulating the plan. "What if you worked for me?" "For you?" Arthur asked, confused. "My company has a young apprentice program. Boys and girls from 15 to 18 who are learning about business," Marcus explained. "But they struggle a lot with basic math. The schools don't prepare them well. Dad, you could give them tutoring classes." Arthur was silent, clearly thinking. "And Mom, we have a space in the office we never use, a large hall. You could organize craft workshops, for the employees, for the community, something that brings people together." "Are you serious?" Elizabeth asked. "Completely. It would be voluntary, no pressure. But if you want to feel useful, here's a way." The two exchanged glances. Then they smiled. "We'd love to," they said in unison. And that's how Arthur went back to teaching, this time to young people eager to learn. He discovered he still had the gift of making math seem simple and interesting. The apprentices adored him, calling him Professor Arthur, with genuine respect. Elizabeth organized weekly workshops for crochet, knitting, painting. The space that was once empty now buzzed with life and creativity. Employees came during lunch to relax and create. The local community was also invited. Marcus saw the transformation in his parents. They were happier, more alive. They had purpose again. But there was still something bothering Marcus, a secret that needed to be revealed. He decided it was time to tell the whole truth. One night, after Ethan went to sleep, Marcus called his parents for a serious conversation in the living room of the main house. "I need to tell you something," he began nervously. "Something that happened a few months before I found you in the rain." Arthur and Elizabeth sat down, attentive. "I was having trouble at the company. Serious trouble," Marcus admitted. "A partner was embezzling money, a lot of money, and I found out too late. We had to make cuts, lay people off. It was the hardest period of my career." "Son, we didn't know," Elizabeth began. How would you? I wasn't talking to you, Marcus continued. But the worst wasn't the financial trouble. It was realizing I was completely alone. No one to talk to. No family to support me. Ethan's just a kid. I couldn't put those problems on him. And I had pushed away the only people who really cared about me. Marcus, Arthur said softly. Every night I'd come home to this huge, empty house and ask myself what I had made of my life. I had money, success, but I was empty inside. Tears started to fall. And then, on that rainy night, I saw you. And it was like the universe was giving me one last chance, a chance to fix what I had broken. Elizabeth stood up and hugged her son. Sometimes we need to get lost to find ourselves, she whispered. And sometimes we need to lose everything to value what really matters. I'm so sorry, Marcus cried on his mother's shoulder, just like he did as a child. I'm sorry for everything, for the lost years, for the moments we didn't share, for being so proud and stubborn. We have our own guilt too, Arthur joined in the hug. We should have been honest with you from the start about the treatment. We should have trusted that you would understand. But I understand now. Marcus pulled away, wiping his face. You wanted to protect me. That's what parents do. They protect their children, no matter the cost. And we'll never stop, Elizabeth smiled through her tears. Even if you're 42 years old, to us you'll always be our little boy. That night, something changed. A barrier that still existed completely collapsed. They were no longer a son and parents trying to reconnect. They were a family that had weathered storms but emerged stronger. The following months brought new revelations and challenges. Marcus learned more about what his parents went through during those 8 months on the street. Stories Elizabeth told in pieces, never all at once, as if it were too painful to revisit. There were nights they slept under bridges because the shelters were full. Days they ate only once because they had to save the little money they had. Moments they were treated as invisible, as human garbage by people hurrying past. The worst part wasn't the hunger or the cold, Elizabeth confessed one afternoon, while knitting beside Marcus in the garden. It was the invisibility. People looked right through us, as if we didn't exist. Was there anyone who helped? Marcus asked. A few. Elizabeth smiled at the memory. Mrs. Gable, who owned a bakery near the Central Market. Every day she gave us the leftover bread. Never wanted anything in return. She said we were all children of God and deserved dignity. I'd like to meet her, thank her. She'd faint if you showed up there, Elizabeth laughed. Imagine, big businessman Marcus Sterling showing up at her bakery. I'm going to show up, and I'm going to do more than thank her. And Marcus kept his word. He visited Mrs. Gable, who indeed nearly fainted from surprise. He not only thanked her, but made a deal with her. His company would buy bread from her to distribute to institutions, a large, regular order that would ensure the bakery's financial security. Why are you doing this? Mrs. Gable asked, her eyes welling up. Because you did something I should have done. You took care of my parents when they needed it most, Marcus replied, and because kindness deserves to be recognized. It was the first of many gestures. Marcus began seeking out all the people who had helped his parents in some way. The shelter owner who always found an extra bed. The young man who worked at the Central Market and let Arthur and Elizabeth take bruised fruit that would have been thrown away. The woman who offered her couch for a week when Elizabeth was sick. Each one received not just thanks but practical help. Interest-free loans, job opportunities, scholarships for their children. Marcus discovered that helping those who had helped his parents brought a joy that no successful business ever had. But not everything was smooth sailing. There were unresolved issues that needed to be addressed, and the biggest one showed up on a Saturday afternoon when Marcus was in the garden with Ethan and his grandparents. A car stopped in front of the mansion, an old rattling car. Out stepped a man around 40, thin, wearing work clothes stained with grease. My God, Arthur whispered. It's Julian. Julian? Marcus asked. My brother. Marcus had a younger brother, Julian, 5 years younger. They had never been close. Julian had always been the family rebel, the one who caused trouble. He left home at 18, and no one had heard much from him since. Julian walked to the gate, which Marcus opened remotely. His brother entered with hesitant steps, his eyes fixed on their parents. Hi, Dad. Hi, Mum, he said simply. Julian. Elizabeth stood up but didn't approach. Tension hung in the air. Marcus. Julian finally looked at his older brother. Long time. 5 years, Marcus replied, his voice neutral. I heard you two made amends. Julian looked around. Nice place, I guess they live better now than when I was still around. There was something bitter in his tone. Marcus noticed right away. What do you want, Julian? Straight to the point, as always. Julian laughed without humor. I want to talk to our parents, if you'll allow it, of course. You don't need my permission, Marcus replied. They're adults. Elizabeth looked at Arthur, who nodded. The two went over to Julian, and Marcus watched as his mother hugged his younger brother with the same intensity she hugged him. Martha, can you take Ethan inside? Marcus asked. I think this is adult talk. After Ethan left, the four of them stayed in the garden. A heavy silence hung until Julian finally spoke. I know I messed everything up, he began. I know I caused trouble, that I disappointed you, but when I found out you were in a bad situation, I tried to help. What do you mean? Marcus asked. He helped us, Arthur confirmed. For the last 2 years, Julian gave us money every month. Not much, but it was what he could spare. You knew where he was? Marcus felt a pang of jealousy. We did, Elizabeth admitted. He never completely abandoned us, even when everything was hard. I work as a mechanic, Julian explained, at a small shop. The pay is low, but I always set aside a portion for our parents. I tried to do my part. Marcus didn't know what to feel. Anger? Gratitude? Shame that he hadn't been the only one to help? Why did you disappear? Marcus finally asked. Why did you cut off contact with everyone? Julian took a deep breath. Because I did something stupid. Really stupid. He looked at his parents. Remember when the house was sold and there was still part of the loan to pay off? We remember, Arthur replied cautiously. I thought I could help, get the money that was missing. Julian ran his hand through his hair. So I got into something. A deal that promised quick profit, selling imported goods without invoices. I'd just be the middleman. Julian, no, Elizabeth whispered. Yes. And of course it went wrong. The shipment was seized. I ended up owing dangerous people. Julian looked at the floor. I had to disappear, move to another city, work any job to pay off the debts. Why didn't you tell us? Arthur asked. Because I was ashamed. Julian exploded. You already had enough problems, and I, the useless son, only made everything worse. I thought it would be better if I just vanished. But you came back, Elizabeth said. I came back because I paid off all the debts. It took 3 years, but I paid them. And when I returned, I saw your situation. Julian looked at Marcus. And I saw that the successful brother had abandoned you. I didn't know, Marcus began. Didn't know, or didn't want to know. Julian confronted him. They're our parents, Marcus. No matter what they did, we don't abandon them. The words hit Marcus like slaps, because Julian was right. He was the successful son, the one with resources, and he had abandoned his parents out of pride. You're right, Marcus admitted. I abandoned them, and I'll carry that guilt for the rest of my life. I didn't come here to fight. Julian softened his tone. I came because they're my parents too, and I want to help however I can. You already help, Elizabeth said. You always helped in your own way. It's not enough. Julian looked around. You have all this now, thanks to Marcus. But I wanted to do my part too. I wanted you to know that even when I was far away, I never stopped caring. Marcus saw his brother with new eyes. Julian might have been rebellious, impulsive, but he was never bad, and when it mattered, he was there. More than Marcus had been. Come work with me, Marcus said suddenly. What? At my company. You know mechanics, right? We have a large fleet of vehicles. We always need maintenance. Come work with me. Fair salary, benefits, everything on the up and up. Julian blinked, surprised. Are you serious? Completely. We're brothers, Julian. We've spent too much time apart. It's time to change that. Julian looked at his parents, then back at Marcus. I'd take it. Thank you. The two brothers shook hands, then hugged. It was awkward, full of years of distance, but it was a start. That night, The five of them had dinner together. Marcus, Julian, Arthur, Elizabeth, and Ethan. A family reunited for the first time in a long time. Conversations flowed, stories were told, laughter echoed. Ethan was fascinated by his newly discovered uncle. Julian told stories from when he was young, the mischief he got into, how he always stirred up trouble. Arthur and Elizabeth added details, making everyone laugh. "Uncle Julian, did you really put a frog in the teacher's purse?" Ethan asked, eyes shining. "I did, and I got a 3-day suspension." Julian laughed. "Your grandmother didn't speak to me for a whole week. You deserved it." Elizabeth pretended to be angry, but she was smiling. Poor Mrs. Thompson, she almost had a heart attack. It was moments like these that Marcus realized what he had missed. Years of family dinners, years of shared stories, years of love and connection. But he was getting them back now. Day after day, meal after meal, conversation after conversation. There were still challenges, of course. Elizabeth's health was still delicate. Arthur had days when fatigue won and he needed to rest. Julian was still adjusting to the new job and the family dynamic. And then, 3 months after that rainy night, something happened that would change everything again. Marcus was in his office at the company when he received a call from Martha, her voice shaken. "Mr. Sterling, you need to come home now." "What happened?" "It's Mrs. Elizabeth." "She fainted. The ambulance is on its way." Marcus dropped everything and ran. When he got home, he found his mother lying on the couch, pale, with Arthur kneeling beside her, holding her hand. Julian was also there, having rushed from the workshop. "Mom?" Marcus knelt on the other side. "I'm fine, son," Elizabeth murmured, but it was obvious she wasn't. "Just a little dizzy." The ambulance arrived and took her to the hospital. The 3 men followed behind. At the hospital, they waited for hours while the doctors examined Elizabeth. Finally, a doctor came out to speak with them. "Mr. Sterling?" "Yes." The 3 answered together. "Mrs. Elizabeth is stable now, but we need to talk." The doctor led them to a private room. "She has a serious heart condition. She'll need surgery." "What kind of surgery?" Marcus asked. "Heart surgery. It's not simple, but it's necessary. Without it, she'll have more and more frequent episodes until—" The doctor didn't need to finish the sentence. "Do the surgery," Marcus said immediately. "The best surgeon, the best hospital, no matter the cost." "Marcus, wait." Arthur grabbed his arm. "We need to talk about this." "Talk about what? It's Mom's life." "I know, but—" Arthur hesitated. "The health plan we have doesn't cover this type of surgery, and we can't afford it." "I'll pay." Marcus was almost shouting. "I have money. I'll pay for everything." "No," Arthur said firmly. "We won't accept." "You won't accept? Are you crazy?" "It's not about being crazy." Arthur stood his ground. "It's about dignity. We've already depended on you too much." "Dignity? We're talking about my mother's life and my wife." Arthur also raised his voice. "You think I don't want to do everything to save her, but not at the cost of our dignity. I won't spend the rest of my life feeling like a burden to my son." "You're not a burden." "We are, and we know it." Arthur sighed. "Marcus, you've already done too much. You gave us a house, food, clothes, work, dignity. We can't ask for more." "You're not asking. I'm offering." "And I'm refusing." Father and son stood face to face, both stubborn, both convinced of their point. "Mr. Sterling," the doctor interrupted. "Maybe it's better to discuss this later. Mrs. Elizabeth needs a few days of rest before we make any decision about the surgery." Marcus left the hospital furious. How could his father be so stubborn, so proud? Elizabeth's life was at stake. He drove aimlessly for hours, processing everything. When he finally got home, he found Ethan waiting in the living room. "Dad? Is Grandma going to be okay?" Marcus hugged his son. "She will, champ. She'll be fine." "I'm scared of losing her," Ethan confessed. "I just met her. I don't want her to go away." "She won't, I promise." But how could he make that promise if his father was refusing help? That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He stayed in the study, thinking, planning. There had to be a way. a way to help without hurting his father's pride. In the morning, he had an idea, a risky idea, but one that might work. He went to the pool house where Arthur was. The old man hadn't slept, that was obvious. "Dad, I need to propose something. If it's about paying for the surgery, the answer is still no. It's not." Marcus sat down. "It's about a debt." "A debt? You saved my life," Marcus said. "When I was sick, you spent everything, sold everything to save me. That's a debt I owe you." "Son, parents don't collect debts." "Let me finish," Marcus interrupted him. "That debt can never be repaid, but it can be honored. And the way to honor it is to do for you what you did for me. Give everything to save someone I love." Arthur was silent. "Mum is going to have the surgery. I'll pay. But I'm not doing this out of charity or pity." Marcus held his father's hands. "I'm doing it because it's my right as a son. Coming from someone who has received everything from you, it's my right to give back." "Marcus," Arthur's voice trembled, "please, Dad, don't take this chance away from me. The chance to save someone I love as much as you saved me. Don't deny me this." Arthur looked at his own hands, then at his son. "You were always stubborn," he said finally. "Just like me." "I learned from the best." Arthur sighed, defeated. "All right, but with one condition." "What?" "When your mother gets better, I'm going to work for real. Not just volunteer. I'll contribute, pay the bills, do my part." "Dad, you already do more than enough with your work at the company." "It's not enough for me," Arthur cut in. "I need to feel like I'm contributing, like I'm not just a burden. You understand?" Marcus understood. He understood perfectly. Because he was also proud, also needed to feel like he was doing something useful. "Deal." He extended his hand. "Deal." Arthur shook it. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. That helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, Elizabeth had the surgery 2 weeks later. It was a 6-hour operation, 6 hours during which Marcus, Arthur, Julian and Ethan waited in the waiting room, each dealing with the tension in their own way. Arthur paced back and forth, tireless. Julian sat still, hands clenched, staring at the floor. Marcus tried to work on his laptop, but couldn't concentrate. And Ethan, poor Ethan, tried to be brave, but was visibly scared. "She'll be okay, Grandpa?" Ethan asked at one point. Arthur pulled his grandson close. "Your grandmother is strong, Ethan. The strongest woman I know. She'll get through this." "How can you be sure?" "Because she's never given up on anything in her life," Arthur said with a sad smile. "Not even in the hardest times. And she won't give up now. Not when we finally have everything we ever wanted. Our family reunited." Finally, the surgeon came out. Everyone stood up in one simultaneous motion. "The surgery was successful," he announced, and Marcus felt his legs almost give way from relief. "Mrs. Elizabeth is in recovery. In a few hours you can see her." "Thank you." Arthur shook the doctor's hand repeatedly. "Thank you so much." "She's a fighter," the doctor smiled. "She recovered better than we expected for someone her age." When they were allowed into the room, they found Elizabeth awake, pale but smiling faintly. "Stop looking at me like I'm about to break," she said to Arthur. "I'm fine. You just had heart surgery. And I survived." Elizabeth reached out to Ethan. "Come here, my angel." Ethan approached cautiously, as if his grandmother were made of glass. "I'm fine, dear," Elizabeth assured him. "I'll be fine, and you know why." "Why?" "Because I have many reasons to live." Elizabeth looked at everyone in the room. "I have a wonderful husband, 2 children I love more than anything, and a beautiful grandson I've only just begun to get to know. I'm not going to lose that for anything in the world." The recovery days were long. Elizabeth had to stay in the hospital for 2 weeks, then a few more weeks of bed rest at home. Marcus hired a private nurse to help with care, and this time Arthur didn't protest. But Elizabeth was impatient. She hated staying still. She was always trying to get up, do something, be useful. "Mom, you need to rest," Marcus insisted. "I've rested enough. I'm going crazy here." The doctor said at least 6 weeks of rest. The doctor doesn't have to lie in bed all day, Elizabeth grumbled. It was Ethan who came up with the idea of keeping his grandmother busy without physically straining her. He started spending every afternoon with her, doing homework, telling her about school, asking for help with projects. "Grandma, I need to make a family tree for school," he said one afternoon. "Can you help me?" "Of course," Elizabeth perked up. "I'll tell you everything about our family." And that's how Ethan discovered fascinating stories, how his great-grandparents had come from Ireland and started from scratch in the United States, how his great-grandmother had also been a teacher just like Arthur, how the family had faced crises, wars, changes. "Our family is resilient," Elizabeth explained as they set up the tree together. "We always have been. No matter what happens, we get up and keep going." "Like you and Grandpa?" Ethan asked. "When you lost everything." "Exactly." Elizabeth smiled. "We lost everything, Ethan. House, savings, security. But we never lost the most important thing." "What's the most important thing?" "Each other. And now, you too." Elizabeth hugged her grandson. "Family is what keeps us standing when everything falls apart." The conversation was overheard by Marcus, who was passing through the hallway. He stopped, leaning against the wall, listening. "Dad?" It was Julian who approached. "Are you okay?" "Yes." Marcus wiped his eyes quickly. "I'm just happy. It's strange to say that after everything, but I'm genuinely happy." Julian placed his hand on his brother's shoulder. "You know, I was jealous of you," he confessed. "I always was. You were the successful son, the smart one, the responsible one. I was just the troublemaker." "Julian, let me finish," Julian continued. "But now I see that you also had your problems, your demons, and that in the end we weren't so different. Two sons trying to do their best, making mistakes in our own way. You didn't make mistakes." Marcus looked at his brother. "You were there when I wasn't. You took care of our parents when I abandoned them. You're a better man than me." "We're not competition," Julian smiled. "We're brothers, and it's time to act like it." The two hugged there in the hallway, a real hug, full of years of misunderstandings finally resolved. As Elizabeth recovered, life returned to normal, or rather, the new normal. Family meals became more frequent. Sundays were sacred, everyone together for lunch. Arthur returned to teaching classes to apprentices at the company, now with even more energy. Elizabeth, despite her physical limitations after surgery, reorganized the craft workshops, this time training other people to help her. Julian established himself at the company and proved to be exceptional at his work. He not only took care of Marcus's fleet, but also started giving basic mechanics classes to other employees, and Ethan flourished having his grandparents and uncle nearby. He was happier, more secure. He had roots now, a complete family. But as in every good story, there was still a twist to come, a twist that no one expected. It was a Saturday afternoon, 3 months after Elizabeth's surgery. The family was gathered in the garden for a barbecue. Marcus was at the grill, Julian was helping him, Arthur was playing ball with Ethan, and Elizabeth was supervising everything from a comfortable chair. Martha appeared at the back door. "Mr. Marcus, there's a visitor." "Who is it?" "A gentleman. He says it's very important. About family business." Marcus handed the spatula to Julian and went to the front of the house. In the living room was a man in his 60s, well-dressed, with a leather briefcase. "Mr. Marcus Sterling." The man stood up. "Yes. And you are?" "My name is Mr. Harrison Vance. I'm a lawyer." He extended a card. "I've come to discuss a matter related to your family, specifically about your father, Arthur Sterling." Marcus felt a knot in his stomach. "What about my father?" "May I speak with him present? It's a matter that concerns him directly." Reluctantly, Marcus called his father. Arthur entered the room, his smile fading when he saw the lawyer. "Mr. Arthur Sterling?" Mr. Vance asked. "Yes." Arthur's voice was cautious. "Pleasure to meet you. I represent the Whitmore family, specifically Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, recently deceased." The name meant nothing to Marcus, but he saw the color drain from his father's face. "Eleanor," Arthur whispered. "She's gone." 3 weeks ago, the lawyer confirmed. "She left a will, and in it there is something for you." "For me?" Arthur seemed genuinely confused. "Yes." The lawyer opened his briefcase and took out some documents. "Mrs. Eleanor left you a property, a house in the countryside, specifically in the Aspen region." "That doesn't make sense." Arthur shook his head. "Why would she leave me anything?" "There was a letter attached to the will." The lawyer handed over an envelope. "She asked that it be delivered personally." With trembling hands, Arthur opened the envelope and read. Marcus watched the expressions changing on his father's face. Surprise, shock, tears. "Dad?" Marcus touched his arm. "What does it say?" Arthur didn't answer. He just kept reading, the tears falling freely now. When he finished, he handed the letter to Marcus. "Dear Arthur, if you're reading this, it means I've finally passed. Don't feel sorry for me. I had a long life, and for the most part a happy one. I know you got married and had a family. I heard rumors over the years. I never had the courage to seek you out. Not after everything, not after what your family did to me. But I'm not writing to reopen old wounds. I'm writing because, despite everything, I loved you. You were my first love, the only one who truly mattered. And I know you made the right choice, marrying Elizabeth, moving on, building a life. This house was where we planned to live, remember? Our dream house. You showed me the land. We made plans, dreamed together. I built it anyway, alone. And I lived in it all these years, imagining what it would be like if you were there with me. But now it's yours. I hope it brings you and your family the happiness we couldn't have together. With eternal love, Eleanor." Marcus finished reading and looked at his father, who was sitting heavily on the couch. "Dad, who was Eleanor?" "Someone from my past," Arthur answered, his voice breaking. "Before I met your mother. She was your girlfriend." "Fiancée," Arthur corrected. "We were engaged. We were going to get married." "What?" Marcus was shocked. "And what happened?" "My family didn't approve." Arthur explained slowly. "Eleanor came from a poor family. Very poor. My parents wanted me to marry someone from a good family, someone with money. And you? I was young. A coward." Arthur covered his face with his hands. "I gave in to the pressure. I broke up with her. I broke her heart. But then you met Mom. Years later, Elizabeth was sweet, kind, honest. I truly loved her. Not in the same fiery way I loved Eleanor, but a mature love. Genuine." Arthur looked at his son. "Your mother always knew that there was someone before her, and she never judged me for it. And Eleanor never married." "No," Arthur shook his head. "At least that's what I heard. She built a life alone. Successful, it seems, but alone. And now she left you the house you planned together. Seems like the end of a story, doesn't it?" Arthur smiled sadly. "But a story that ended 40 years ago." The lawyer intervened. "The house is quite valuable, Mr. Arthur. Well located, well maintained. If you prefer to sell it, I can help with that." "No." The answer was immediate. "I won't sell it." "Dad?" Marcus was surprised. "Eleanor kept this house all these years," Arthur explained. "The house we planned together. Our dream house. It wouldn't be right to sell it, as if it were just any property." "Then what are you going to do with it?" Arthur thought for a long moment. "I'm going to turn it into something good," he decided. "Something that honors Eleanor's memory and everything she represented." "How?" "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out." After the lawyer left, Marcus helped his father go to the pool house. Elizabeth was at the door, clearly having heard part of the conversation. So she finally passed on. Elizabeth said softly, "You knew about her?" Marcus was surprised. "Of course." Elizabeth took her husband's hand. "Arthur never hid his past from me. He told me about Eleanor on our third date." "And you weren't jealous?" Of a story that ended before we began? Elizabeth smiled. No, we all have pasts, dear. What matters is the present we built. She left me the house, Elizabeth, Arthur said. Our house, the one we planned together. I know. Elizabeth hugged him. And I know you'll do the right thing with it. Marcus left his parents alone, knowing they needed a moment. When he returned to the garden, he found Julian and Ethan waiting anxiously. So? Julian asked. What's this about an inheritance? Marcus told him, with Ethan listening, fascinated. So Grandpa had another fiancée before Grandma? Ethan asked, wide-eyed. He did, but he chose your grandmother, and it was the best choice he ever made. It's like a soap opera. Ethan was excited. Yeah, champ. Life is sometimes more dramatic than any soap opera. The following days were a time of reflection for everyone. Arthur spent a lot of time alone, thinking about what to do with the house. He went to visit it, taking Elizabeth along. The house was beautiful, rustic style, surrounded by pine trees, with a view of the mountains. Inside it was impeccably maintained, full of tasteful furniture but with an air of loneliness. She lived here alone all these years, Arthur said, looking around, surrounded by the dreams we had together. She loved you very much, Elizabeth observed, to keep all this for so long, and I hurt her deeply. You were young. You made the wrong decision for the wrong reasons. Elizabeth took her husband's hand. But you also made right decisions. You built a family, raised wonderful children, had a good life. Even with all the problems? Especially with the problems. Elizabeth smiled. Problems teach us. They strengthen us. They make us who we are. Arthur kissed her gently. How did I get so lucky to have you? It wasn't luck, Elizabeth corrected. It was choice. You chose me, I chose you. And we've kept choosing each other every day since. They returned to Chicago with a decision made. Arthur called the whole family for a meeting. I've decided what to do with the house, he announced. I'm going to turn it into a temporary shelter. A shelter? Marcus asked. For people in transition, Arthur explained. People who lost their jobs, their homes, who are starting over. A place where they can stay for a few months, get their lives together, receive support to return to a stable life. Like you needed, Julian realized. Exactly. Arthur nodded. Elizabeth and I know how desperate it is to have nowhere to go, how humiliating it is to rely on shelters. This center will be different. It will be a place with dignity, where people can recover not just physically but emotionally. That's a beautiful idea, Dad. Marcus was emotional. And I want to help. Financially, with resources, whatever you need. We'll work on it together, Elizabeth added, as a family. And that's exactly what they did. In the following months, Eleanor's house was transformed. It didn't lose its charm and beauty, but gained purpose. Comfortable rooms were adapted to accommodate families. A communal kitchen was installed. A professional training room was created. Arthur used his experience as a teacher to organize free courses. Julian taught mechanics classes. Elizabeth coordinated craft workshops, teaching skills that could generate income. Marcus provided financial support and connections, partnerships with companies to offer job opportunities, partnerships with schools for the children of the hosted families. The inauguration of the Eleanor Whitmore Refuge took place on a beautiful spring day. The whole family was there, friends, employees of Marcus's company, and the first families that would be hosted. Arthur gave a short speech, his voice trembling with emotion. Eleanor Whitmore was someone I loved in my youth, someone I deeply hurt because of my cowardice, he began. She kept this house for decades, along with dreams that never came true. But now, those dreams have a new purpose. This house, which should have been ours, will be for everyone in need, a place of new beginnings, of hope, of dignity. Elizabeth joined him. My husband and I know what it's like to lose everything. We know what it's like to have no place to sleep, nothing to eat, how it feels to be invisible. Her voice was firm. But we also know that it's possible to start over, with help, with love, with family. Marcus, Julian, and Ethan also stepped up to the small makeshift podium. This house represents second chances, Marcus spoke. The chance Eleanor gave my father to honor the past. The chance my parents gave me to be a better son. The chance we all have to make a difference in other people's lives. The first families entered, amazed. Parents holding children. Elderly couples supporting each other. Lonely people carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. All were welcomed with hugs, with warm food, with a safe place to sleep, with the promise that they were not alone. In the weeks that followed, the refuge flourished. Stories of transformation began to appear. A man who lost his job during the pandemic got training and a new position. A single mother found daycare for her children and went back to school. An elderly couple who lost everything in a scam rebuilt their lives with dignity. And always, Arthur and Elizabeth were there, teaching classes, offering advice, simply being present. "They are like angels," one of the hosted women commented to Marcus during a visit. "Mr. Arthur helped me put together a resume. Mrs. Elizabeth taught me to crochet, and now I sell my work at the market. They changed my life." Marcus watched his parents with admiration. They had turned pain into purpose, loss into gain, suffering into service. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. That helps us a lot as we are just starting out. Now continuing. 1 year after that rainy night, the family decided to have a celebration. It wasn't anyone's birthday nor a holiday. It was just 1 year since everything changed. Dinner was at the main house, with the table extended as much as possible to accommodate everyone. Marcus, his wife Marina, who had reconciled with the family after seeing the changes, Ethan, Arthur, Elizabeth, Julian, and his new girlfriend Chloe. 1 year, Marcus raised his glass. 1 year since the rain brought us together. 1 year since I had the chance to fix the biggest mistake of my life. "It wasn't a mistake," Arthur gently interrupted. "It was a lesson, for all of us." "I learned that family isn't perfect," Elizabeth added. "Family makes mistakes. Hurts, but if there is true love, there is always a chance to start over. I learned that pride is a luxury we cannot afford," Julian said, "and that siblings need to support each other, not compete." "I learned that having grandparents is the best thing in the world," Ethan said, making everyone laugh. Marcus thought about his words. "I learned that success isn't measured in money or property. It's measured in love, in connections, in being there for the people who matter." "Eloquent," Marina joked, kissing her husband. "It took 42 years, but you finally learned." Laughter filled the room. Food was served, stories were told, plans for the future were made. Arthur and Elizabeth were talking about expanding the refuge, maybe opening more units. Julian was planning to propose to Chloe. Ethan was excited about a school project on family history. And Marcus? Marcus simply watched, his heart overflowing with gratitude. Later that night, after everyone had left, Marcus walked to the place where it all began, the sidewalk in front of the mansion. It was a clear night now, no rain, just stars shining. He remembered how he found his parents there, soaked, trembling, helpless. He remembered the shock, the anger, the confusion, but he also remembered what he felt afterward, the chance to fix things, to rebuild, to love. "Can't sleep," Arthur's voice surprised him. "Dad, I thought you were sleeping." "I was, but I woke up and saw you here." Arthur joined his son, thinking about something specific. "That night," Marcus admitted, "when I found you here. We think about it often, too." Arthur looked at the sky. "It was the lowest night of our lives, but it was also the beginning of something new. You never asked me why I didn't open the gate sooner, why I left you waiting in the rain." "Because we knew the answer," Arthur replied. "You were angry, hurt, and you had every right to be. But it was so wrong." "Marcus," Arthur placed his hand on his son's shoulder, "stop punishing yourself. What happened, happened. What matters is what we do from here." "And what do? We keep loving. We keep being present. We keep being family." Arthur smiled. "It's that simple." Father and son stayed there for a few more minutes in comfortable silence. Then they went back inside, where Elizabeth was making tea in the kitchen. Couldn't sleep either? She asked. Looks like it. Marcus accepted a cup. Then let's talk. Elizabeth sat at the table. We still have many stories to tell, many memories to create. And they talked, through the early morning hours, about the past, about the present, about the future, about plans and dreams and hopes. When Marcus finally went to bed, dawn was breaking. But he wasn't tired. He was energized, alive. Because he had what he had always been looking for without knowing it. He had family, he had love, he had purpose. And it all began on that rainy night, when he saw his parents on the sidewalk and made the right choice, the choice that would change everything. The following months brought more change and growth. The Eleanor Whitmore Refuge became a benchmark. Other cities began asking how to replicate the model. Arthur and Elizabeth were invited to give talks, sharing their experience and vision. Marcus expanded the programs at the company. He created an emergency fund for employees in difficult situations. He established partnerships with educational institutions. His company, once focused only on profit, now had a clear social purpose. Julian and Chloe got married in a simple but moving ceremony in the garden of the mansion. Ethan was the ring-bearer, proud of his role. Arthur and Elizabeth cried tears of joy, seeing their youngest son finally find his happiness. And Ethan grew up surrounded by love. He had stories to tell at school. He had grandparents who picked him up a few times a week. He had an uncle who taught him about cars. He had a complete family, noisy, imperfect, but full of love. One day, during a visit to the refuge, Marcus found a little girl sitting alone in the garden. She was about 10 years old, with big, sad eyes. "Hi." Marcus sat down beside her. "Are you okay?" "I think so." The girl replied softly. "How long have you been here?" 2 weeks. My mum and I lost our home." She looked at her hands. "It's strange being here." "Strange how?" "Strange that strangers are so kind to us. Mr. Arthur is helping my mum find a job. Mrs. Elizabeth taught me to make a scarf." The girl touched the scarf she was wearing, even though it wasn't very cold. "Why do you do this?" Marcus thought about the question. It was a simple question, but with a complex answer. "Because one day, the people I love needed help, and I wasn't there to help them," he answered honestly. "So now, I try to help other people, so that no one feels as alone as they did." "Your parents?" "Yes, my parents went through very difficult times, and I wasn't the son I should have been." "But now you are?" Marcus smiled. "Now I'm trying. Every day." The girl thought for a moment. "When I grow up, I'm going to help people too, the way you do." "I'm sure you will." Marcus stood up. "And you know what? You don't have to wait until you grow up. You can start now, being kind, helping those around you, making a difference in the little things." "Really?" "Really. The biggest changes start with small gestures." The girl smiled, the first time Marcus had seen her smile. That conversation stayed with him. That was what they wanted to create. Not just a shelter, but a cycle of kindness. People who were helped would later help others. Love multiplied. He shared the conversation with his parents that night. "That's exactly it," Elizabeth said, her eyes shining. "We're planting seeds. We won't see all of them bloom, but they will bloom." "Like you," Arthur looked at his children. "You are our seeds, and look how you've bloomed." "Even after everything?" Marcus asked. "After all the mistakes?" "Especially after the mistakes," Arthur corrected. "Mistakes teach us. They shape us. They make us better if we let them." "And we did let them," Julian added. "Each of us. We chose to learn. We chose to grow. We chose to be better." That night, Marcus wrote something in his journal. He didn't usually write, but he felt he needed to record that moment. 1.5 years after that rainy night, I realized something fundamental. I didn't save my parents by bringing them home. They saved me. They saved me from loneliness, from pride, from a life empty of true meaning. I learned that family isn't perfect, it isn't easy. It's messy, complicated, painful sometimes, but it's the most valuable thing we have. It's worth every effort, every tear, every difficult moment. I learned that it's never too late to start over, to mend, to choose love over pride. And I learned that true success isn't about how much money we have in the bank. It's about how many lives we touch, how much love we share, how present we are for the people who matter. My parents taught me that. Not with words, but with actions, with silent sacrifices, with unconditional love. And now it's my turn to teach. To Ethan, to the people at the refuge, to everyone who crosses my path. It's my turn to be the change I want to see, to be the son, father, brother I was called to be. It all started on a rainy night. But the story is just beginning. 2 years after that transformative night, the Sterling family's life had found a new rhythm. A rhythm of balance between work and family, between giving and receiving, between remembering the past and building the future. The Eleanor Whitmore Refuge had helped more than 50 families start over. Each story was unique, each journey had its challenges, but they all shared something: renewed hope. Marcus was in his office when he received a call that would change everything again. "Mr. Sterling?" It was the voice of Mr. Harrison Vance, the lawyer. "Mr. Vance, how are you?" "Well, thank you. I'm calling because something unexpected has come up." "Related to what?" "To Eleanor Whitmore's will." There was a pause. There was a clause that would only be revealed after the house had been in use for a year. Marcus sat up, attentive. "What kind of clause?" "Eleanor left a fund, a significant fund, to be used exclusively for the maintenance and expansion of the refuge as long as it kept its original purpose." "A fund? How much?" $3 million. Marcus almost dropped the phone. $3 million? Yes. Eleanor was a successful businesswoman. She never married, had no children. She saved all of this for this, to honor the love she had for her father. She planned all this, every detail, Mr. Harrison Vance confirmed. She knew her father would do the right thing with the house, and she left the resources to make sure it lasted. Marcus hung up the phone in shock. $3 million. With that, they could do so much. Expand the refuge, open others, help so many people. He called the whole family for an emergency meeting. When he told them about the fund, everyone was speechless. "She really planned everything," Elizabeth murmured. "Even after all this time, she still loved." "It wasn't just love," Arthur said thoughtfully. "It was forgiveness. She forgave me for the choice I made, and now she gives us the means to do more good." "What are we going to do with so much money?" Julian asked. "We're going to do what she wanted," Marcus decided. "We're going to expand. We're going to help more people. We're going to turn pain into purpose, like we've always done." In the following months, plans were laid out. A second refuge would be opened in another city. Programs would be expanded. Partnerships would be strengthened. But Marcus wanted to do something more, something that honored not just Eleanor, but the entire journey the family had taken. He proposed creating a special program, the Second Chances program. It would focus on reuniting families separated by disagreements, pride, or hurt, offering mediation, counseling, resources to help families reconnect. "Because if we did it," Marcus explained during the program presentation, "other families can too. No one should lose precious years to pride or misunderstandings." The program launched, and the response was overwhelming. Families from all over the region sought help. Parents and children separated for years, siblings who hadn't spoken, couples on the brink of divorce, and always Arthur and Elizabeth were there, sharing their story, showing it was possible to rebuild. That love could overcome anything. Ethan, now 10 years old, also participated in his own way. He started a club at school called Little Helpers, children learning about empathy, community service, making a difference. "Grandpa says we're never too small to help," Ethan explained to his teacher. "So let's help." And they helped, collecting winter coats, visiting nursing homes, planting trees, small gestures that made a difference. Marcus watched his son with immense pride. Ethan was growing up with values that he himself only learned too late. But it wasn't too late. It was never too late to teach, to change, to be better. On a Sunday morning, 3 years after that rainy night, the whole family was gathered in the garden. It was the baptism of Julian and Chloe's daughter, little Eleanor, named in honor of the woman who made so much possible. Marcus held his niece, amazed by that new life, full of possibilities. "She'll never know the pain we went through," Julian said softly. "She'll never know what it's like not to have a united family." "No," Marcus agreed. "But she'll know the story. She'll learn from our mistakes. And she'll grow up knowing that family is the most precious thing we have." The ceremony was simple but moving. Father Thomas, who had baptized both Marcus and Julian decades ago, now baptized the new generation. He looked at the gathered family and smiled. "This family," he said during the homily, "is a living testimony of redemption, of forgiveness, of love that overcomes all barriers." After the ceremony, there was a party in the garden. Friends, company employees, people from the refuge, all celebrating together. It was exactly the kind of event Marcus used to avoid in the past, too loud, too chaotic. But now he loved it. "Mr. Sterling?" a timid voice called him. It was a young man, maybe 25, holding a baby. "Yes? Sorry to interrupt. I'm Fernando. I was at the refuge a year ago. Your mother taught me woodworking." Marcus vaguely remembered. The refuge had become so large that it was hard to know everyone personally. "How are you, Fernando?" "Very well." The young man's face lit up. "I got a job at a furniture factory. I'm earning good money. I rented an apartment." He looked at the baby. "And I got married. This is Pedro, 3 months old." "Congratulations." Marcus was genuinely happy. "I wanted to thank you." Fernando continued, his voice emotional. "When I arrived at the refuge, I was broken. I had lost everything. I thought there was no hope. But Mrs. Elizabeth, she treated me like her own son. She gave me hope. She taught me that I had worth. She has that gift." Marcus smiled. "That's why I came today. I know it's your niece's baptism, but I wanted you to know." Fernando held the baby tighter. "You saved my life, literally, and I want my son to grow up knowing there's goodness in the world, that there are people like you." After Fernando walked away, Marcus had to discreetly wipe his eyes. It was stories like these that made it all worth it. "Are you crying, Dad?" Ethan appeared beside him. "They're happy tears, champ." "I get happy too when I see the people we've helped." Ethan held his father's hand. "Grandma says we're planting seeds of love." "Your grandmother is very wise." "I know." Ethan smiled. "When I grow up, I want to be like you, and Grandma and Grandpa. I want to help people." Marcus knelt down to his son's level. "You already help, Ethan. More than you know. Just by being who you are, kind and caring, you already make a difference." "Really?" "Really." Marcus hugged him. "I'm very proud of you." The party continued until nightfall. When everyone had left, the immediate family stayed to help clean up. Even though Martha insisted she would do it all, everyone wanted to pitch in. "It's our mess. We do it together," Elizabeth said, already rolling up her sleeves. They worked side by side, talking, laughing, sharing the day. It was in simple moments like these that Marcus felt the family connection most. Not in the big occasions, but in the small moments of being together. When the kitchen was clean and everyone was getting ready to leave, Arthur asked for everyone's attention. "I have something to say," he began, looking nervous. "Dad?" Marcus was worried. "Is everything okay?" "Everything is great," Arthur assured him. "Actually, better than great. Elizabeth and I have news." Everyone waited, expectant. "We've decided." Elizabeth took her husband's hand. "We're going to write a book." "A book?" Julian asked, surprised. "About our journey," Arthur explained. "From Marcus's illness, through the loss of the house, the years on the streets, to the reconciliation and the refuge. Everything." "But why?" Marcus was confused. "Because there are so many families out there going through what we went through," Elizabeth replied. "Families torn apart by pride, by misunderstandings, by pain. If our story can help even one family reconcile, it's worth sharing. Besides," Arthur added, We want Ethan, little Eleanor, and the future generations to know where we came from, the battles we faced, so they never forget to value what they have. It's a wonderful idea. Marcus was emotional, and I'll help. We'll publish it through a friend of mine who owns a publishing house. You don't have to, Arthur began, but Marcus interrupted him. Dad, you need to stop refusing help, he said gently. Helping you makes me happy. It gives me purpose. Let me do this. Arthur and Elizabeth exchanged glances, then nodded. Over the following months, Marcus's parents devoted themselves to the book. They spent hours reminiscing, writing, revisiting painful but important memories. It wasn't easy. There were days when Elizabeth cried, remembering the cold nights on the street, days when Arthur questioned whether he was doing the right thing by exposing so much of the family. But they kept going, because they believed in the message. They believed they could make a difference. Marcus hired a professional writer to help them structure the narrative. Diane was a 50-year-old woman, sensitive and talented. She fell in love with the story immediately. This isn't just a story of family reconciliation, Diane said after the first meeting. It's a story about human dignity, about never giving up, about the transformative power of love. The process took a year of writing sessions, revisions, debates about what to include and what to leave out. The book was finished just before the 4th anniversary of that rainy night. The launch was organized in the auditorium of Marcus's company. Dozens of people attended. Employees, people from the refuge, friends, family. The local media was also there, interested in the story. When Arthur and Elizabeth stepped onto the stage to speak, there was complete silence. "My name is Arthur Sterling," he began, his voice clear despite the emotion. "And this is my wife, Elizabeth. 4 years ago, we were sitting on a sidewalk under a torrential rain with nowhere to go." He paused, letting the image sink in. "We had lost everything, our home, our savings, our dignity. We spent months living in shelters, depending on the charity of others, being invisible to most people." Elizabeth continued, "But the material loss wasn't the worst. The worst was the separation of our family. For 5 years, we didn't speak to our oldest son, because of pride, hurt, misunderstandings that seemed impossible to resolve. On that rainy night," Arthur resumed, "we were in front of his house, not to ask for anything, just to see him from afar, to know he was okay. And then he saw us. What happened next changed everything." Elizabeth smiled through her tears. "It wasn't instant. It wasn't magical. It was hard, painful, full of difficult conversations. But it was real. This book," Arthur held up a copy, "is our story. But it's also the story of thousands of families who are separated right now, families who think it's too late, that the damage is too great, that there's no turning back. We're here to say," Elizabeth declared, "there's always a way back. There's always a chance to start over. If we made it, you can too." The audience rose in applause. Marcus, in the front row with Ethan and Marina, was openly wiping away tears. After the presentations, there was a book signing session. The line was long. People wanted not just the book, but to touch Arthur and Elizabeth, to thank them, to share their own stories. An elderly woman, about 70 years old, held Elizabeth's hands for a long time. "I haven't spoken to my daughter in 10 years, she confessed, over a silly fight about inheritance. But after hearing you two, I'm going to look for her tomorrow." "Do it," Elizabeth squeezed back. "Don't waste any more time. Life is too short to waste on pride." Story after story. Father and son separated, siblings who didn't speak, couples on the verge of divorce, all finding hope in Arthur and Elizabeth's journey. The book became an unexpected success. Within 3 months, it was on the bestseller list. Invitations started pouring in. TV shows, lectures, interviews. Arthur and Elizabeth accepted with humility, always redirecting the focus. It wasn't about them, they said. It was about the message. It was about family. It was about love that overcomes. In a particularly impactful interview, the host asked Elizabeth, "What would you say to someone thinking about cutting ties with their family?" Elizabeth thought carefully before responding. "I would say I understand the pain, I understand the anger, I understand the pride," she began. "But I would also say that years go by fast, And you won't want to look back and see only wasted time. Conversations never had, hugs never given. And what if the other person doesn't want to reconcile? Then you do your part anyway, Elizabeth replied. Reach out, even if you're rejected. Leave the door open, even if no one walks through, because what matters isn't just the result. It's knowing that you tried, that you didn't give up, that you chose love over pride. The interview went viral on social media. Millions of views, comments from people sharing their own stories of reconciliation or wishing they had the courage to try. The movement grew beyond what anyone could have imagined. Support groups began to form, people using the book as a guide to start difficult conversations with estranged family members. And the refuge? The refuge kept growing. With the book's success, donations came in from across the country. A third center was opened, then a fourth, each one upholding the same principles: dignity, respect, hope. Marcus was in the office one afternoon when Marina walked in holding the phone. "Honey, there's someone on the line who wants to talk to you. Who is it?" They didn't say their name, just said it's urgent and personal. Intrigued, Marcus answered. "Marcus Sterling." "Mr. Sterling," came a nervous female voice. "My name is Julia Mendez. I don't know if you remember me." "Sorry, I don't recognize the name." "We were classmates in school, a long time ago, over 20 years." She paused. "I know it's strange for me to call like this, but I need to talk about something important, something about your father." Marcus tensed up. "What about my father?" He helped me a lot when I was young," Julia explained quickly. "I was his student. I was going through a horrible time at home. My parents were addicts. I had no one, your father noticed. Even without me asking, he started helping me." "How?" "He would give me money for snacks because he knew I came to school without eating. He got me school supplies. He encouraged me to study." Julia's voice trembled. "He saved my life, Mr. Marcus, literally, because if it weren't for him, I would have given up. I would have followed my parents' path." "I didn't know that," Marcus admitted. "He would never talk about it. That wasn't his style." "But I needed you to know," Julia continued. "I read his book and your mother's. I saw the whole story. And I realized I needed to tell my part of it." "Where are you now, Julia?" "I'm a teacher," she said proudly. "Just like your father was. I work at a public school in a low-income neighborhood, and I try to do for my students what your father did for me." "He'll want to know about this," Marcus said, emotional. "Can you come visit him?" "I'd love to." A week later, Julia visited. She was a woman in her early 40s, well-dressed, confident. Nothing remained of the scared teenager she had been. When she saw Arthur, she couldn't hold back her tears. "Professor Arthur," she hugged him tightly. "Thank you. Thank you for not giving up on me." Arthur was clearly emotional but also confused. "Julia? Little Julia?" "Not so little anymore," she laughed through the tears. "But yes, it's me." They talked for hours. Julia told her story, how she had earned a scholarship to college, how she became a teacher, how she met her husband, how she had 2 children who were now in university. "None of this would have happened without you," she insisted. "You showed me that I had worth, that I deserved more than what I had." "I only did what any teacher should do," Arthur Sterling said humbly. "But many don't," Julia corrected. "Many look but don't see, but you saw, and you made a difference." After Julia left, Arthur was quiet for a long time. Elizabeth sat beside him. "Are you okay?" "I'm thinking," Arthur replied. "About how many lives we touch without realizing it. Julia is just one. How many other students did I help without ever knowing the outcome? Many, I'm sure." Elizabeth held his hand. "You always were a dedicated teacher. You always cared. And now with the book, with the refuge, we're touching even more lives." Arthur looked at his wife. "It's frightening and wonderful at the same time. It's the legacy we'll leave." Elizabeth smiled. "Not money or property, but transformed lives, reunited families, multiplied love. Julia's visit inspired Marcus to do something. He started a tracking project. Find Arthur's former students, discover their stories, document the impact a dedicated teacher had over 40 years. The project took months, but the results were incredible. Doctors who were inspired by Arthur, engineers who mastered math thanks to his methods, businessmen who learned ethics and values from him, ordinary people who simply remembered him as someone who cared. Marcus compiled everything into a surprise video. On Arthur's 68th birthday, he gathered the whole family in the garden for a small celebration. But when the screen lit up, showing former student after former student thanking and sharing their stories, Arthur broke down in tears. "I didn't know," he repeated between sobs. "I didn't know I had made such a difference." "That's how it works, Dad." Marcus hugged him. "We plant seeds and rarely see them all bloom. But they bloom. Like you?" Arthur looked at his son. "You were my seed, and look how beautifully you've bloomed." That birthday marked another moment of transformation. Arthur, who had always been too humble to accept praise, finally began to understand the extent of his impact, not just on his family, but on hundreds of lives over the years. He started writing a second book. This one focused on education, on how teachers can make a difference in the lives of vulnerable students, on how small acts of kindness can change trajectories. Elizabeth also had her project. She expanded the craft workshops, not only in the refugees but in public schools, teaching children and teenagers skills that could generate income. "I don't just want them to learn how to crochet," she explained. "I want them to learn they are capable, that they have talent, that they can create something beautiful with their own hands." Julian found his calling working with at-risk youth. He taught mechanics to teenagers who had dropped out of school. He not only taught the trade, but became a father figure for many who didn't have one. "I could have been any of those boys," he confessed to Marcus one night. "Making wrong decisions, wasting potential. But I had a family that didn't give up on me. I want to be that for them." And Ethan? Ethan grew up seeing all of this. He grew up understanding that success wasn't measured in money, but in impact. That true wealth was in relationships, not possessions. He had started a blog at school about stories of overcoming adversity. He interviewed people from the refuge, shared their journeys. The blog became popular, read by hundreds of students from various schools. "I want people to know that everyone has a story," Ethan explained in one of his posts, "and that every story deserves to be heard." Marcus watched his son with a mixture of pride and admiration. Ethan was becoming a compassionate, aware, engaged young man. Everything Marcus wished he had been at that age. 5 years after that rainy night, the family gathered for another celebration. But this time it was different. It was a moment of collective reflection on how much they had grown, changed, evolved. 5 years, Marcus said, raising his glass. 5 years since the rain brought us together. 5 years of learning, of growth, of love. 5 years since I almost lost everything, Arthur added. And I got it all back, multiplied. 5 years since I learned that family is stronger than pride, Elizabeth completed. 5 years since I returned to where I belonged, Julian toasted. 5 years of the best years of my life. Ethan, now 13 years old, spoke with conviction. Because I had all of you together. They toasted, they cried, they laughed, they shared memories of the last 5 years. The struggles, the victories, the moments of doubt, and the moments of certainty. Martha, who had become part of the family over the years, was also there. "I've worked in many homes," she said when they asked her to share something. "But I've never seen a family like this. You taught me that it doesn't matter where we come from or what we've been through. What matters is how we choose to move forward." The conversation flowed through the night. At one point, Marcus found himself alone in the garden with his father, looking at the stars. "Dad, there's something I never asked," Marcus said after a long silence. "What?" "That night in the rain, why did you come here? Why did you specifically come to my house?" Arthur thought before answering. "Because despite everything, despite the estrangement and the anger, "You were still our son," he said simply. "And we wanted to see you one last time, make sure you were okay, even from a distance." One last time? "We were tired, Marcus, very tired," Arthur admitted. "Not just physically, emotionally, spiritually. We felt we had failed at everything, as parents, as providers, as people. You never failed. At the time we felt we had," Arthur continued. "So we decided. One last visit to your house, see if you were okay, and then we were going to leave." "Leave for where?" "We didn't know. Maybe another city, maybe just give up." Arthur's voice was low. "We were at rock bottom, son. We didn't see a way out." Marcus felt a chill. Realizing how close he had come to losing his parents forever was terrifying. "So the rain saved us," he murmured. "The rain made us wait, made you see us." Arthur agreed. "If it had been a clear night, we probably would have just looked at your house from a distance and left. But the rain trapped us there long enough." "Do you believe in fate?" "I believe in second chances," Arthur smiled. "And I believe that sometimes the universe conspires to give us exactly what we need, even when we think we don't deserve it." Marcus hugged his father, holding tight. "Thank you for not giving up, for coming here that night, for giving me the chance to make things right." "Thank you for seeing us," Arthur replied, "for not simply walking by, for choosing love over anger." Father and son stood there under the stars, processing everything they had lived through in the last 5 years. It was a lot. It was intense. It was transformative. The following month, something unexpected happened. Marcus received a call from a documentary producer. They wanted to make a film about the family's story, about the journey from that rainy night to now. "A documentary?" Marcus was uncertain. "I don't know if we want that much exposure." "It's not about exposure." The producer, a woman named Sarah, explained. "It's about inspiration. Your story can help thousands of families. It can save relationships. It can literally change lives." Marcus talked to the family. It was a long and careful discussion. "It means revealing our ugliest parts," Elizabeth pointed out. "Our flaws, our mistakes, everything." "But maybe that's exactly what people need to see," Julian argued. "That real families are messy, that mistakes happen, but that it's possible to move past them." "Ethan, what do you think?" Marcus asked his son. "I think if our story can help other families avoid making the same mistakes, we should share it," Ethan replied with maturity beyond his years. "Grandma always says that seeds of love must be planted. This documentary could plant a lot of seeds." They decided to accept. The filming took 6 months, cameras following the family through everyday moments, deep interviews about the past, visits to the significant places of their journey. The hardest moment was when they took Arthur and Elizabeth back to the shelters where they had stayed. Watching the parents revisit those places, relive those memories, was painful for everyone. "This was the bunk bed where I slept," Elizabeth said, her voice trembling. "Night after night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how we ended up here." "And this was the dining hall," Arthur added, "where we stood in line to eat, where sometimes the food ran out before it was our turn." The tears were real, the pain was real, but there was also something cathartic about revisiting those places, no longer as victims, but as survivors, as winners. The documentary also showed the present, the work at the refuge, Elizabeth's workshops, Arthur's classes, Ethan's life, the family's growth. And of course it showed reconciliation, it showed difficult conversations, it showed forgiveness, it showed love overcoming pride. When the documentary was released, the response was overwhelming. It premiered at a major film festival and received a standing ovation. Critics praised the raw honesty. The audience connected deeply with the story. But more important than the critical success was the practical impact. Hundreds of people reached out saying the film inspired them to reconnect with foreign relatives, parents looking for children, children looking for parents, siblings reconciling. One story in particular touched the family deeply. A woman named Megan wrote a long letter. "I haven't spoken to my mother in 15 years. She didn't approve of my marriage, and I, being proud, cut off contact completely. My daughter grew up not knowing her grandmother. I convinced myself that I was right, that my mother was the one who needed to apologize first. But after watching the documentary, I realized something. Time was passing. My mother is 75 now. My daughter is 12. How many more years was I going to waste on pride? So I went. I knocked on my mother's door for the first time in 15 years. When she opened it and saw me, she broke down. We hugged and cried for hours. Now we're rebuilding our relationship. It's hard. There's a lot of accumulated hurt. But we're trying. And all because your documentary showed me that there's always time. There's always hope. Thank you for sharing your story. You saved my family." When Arthur read the letter aloud to everyone, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. "This is what it's for," Elizabeth said through tears. "It's for moments like this that we went through everything we did." The success of the documentary brought more opportunities, invitations for international lectures, book proposals in other languages, interest in franchising the refugees model to other regions. But the family kept their feet on the ground. They didn't let success change who they were. They continued living simply. They continued focused on the real work, helping families, transforming lives, planting seeds. Ethan, now 15, had become an exceptional young man. He had created a student movement called Family Bridges, young people helping young people reconnect with their parents, mediating difficult conversations, offering perspective. "A lot of my friends are fighting with their parents," Ethan explained in a school presentation, "over silly things. Curfew, allowance, career choice. And I see how it hurts them, how it hurts the parents too. So I decided to do something. The movement grew quickly, from one school to 10, from 10 to 50, young people across the state participating, facilitating conversations, rebuilding bridges." Marcus watched his son with constant admiration. Ethan was doing at 15 what it had taken him 42 years to learn. He was choosing love over pride, connection over isolation. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Challenges kept arising. The refuge faced financial difficulties when a big promised donation fell through. Arthur had a health problem that left him hospitalized for a week. Elizabeth took a fall and fractured her wrist. It was in these tough moments that the family's strength truly shone. Everyone pulled together. Julian took on more responsibilities at the refuge. Marcus covered the extra costs. Ethan spent every afternoon at the hospital with his grandfather. "Family isn't just for the good times," Marina said during one of the difficult dinners. "It's especially for the bad times, when we need each other." "And we'll always be here," Marcus agreed, "no matter what." Arthur's health scare turned out to be just a fright. Nothing serious, but a reminder that he was getting older. He was almost 70 now. He couldn't do everything he used to. "I need to slow down," he admitted, frustrated. "I can't teach as many classes as before." "Then teach fewer classes, but better ones," Marcus suggested. "Quality over quantity." "Or train other teachers," Ethan added. "Teach them to teach your way. That way your impact multiplies." It was a brilliant idea. Arthur began training other educators in his methods, how to identify vulnerable students, how to offer help without humiliating them, how to make a difference without spending much. The training program became so popular, it turned into a certified course. Public school teachers came from far away to learn from Arthur. "You're creating an army of teachers who care," Marcus said proudly. "Your impact goes far beyond what you could do alone." Elizabeth also adapted her work. With her wrist injured, she couldn't do crafts like before, but she discovered she had a knack for counseling. The women who came to the workshop started seeking her out to talk about their problems, relationships, children, life. "You should formalize this," Martha suggested. "Hold actual counseling sessions." "But I'm not a psychologist." "You don't have to be," Martha insisted. "You're someone who has lived a lot, who has gone through unimaginable hardships and come out the other side. People need that wisdom." Elizabeth started what she called wisdom circles, small groups of women meeting to discuss life's challenges. She didn't give ready-made advice, just shared her experience and facilitated the conversation. "What I've discovered," Elizabeth explained, "is that most people already know the answer. They just need a safe space to figure it out." The wisdom circles became incredibly popular. Women of all ages came. Young mothers seeking guidance, middle-aged women navigating transitions, older women dealing with loss and change. And Elizabeth listened, shared, connected, created community. "You found your late calling," Arthur teased one night. "At 68 you discovered you're a counselor." "It's never too late," Elizabeth smiled. "That's one of the lessons life has taught me. It's never too late to discover who you are, to find your purpose, to make a difference." 7 years after that rainy night, the family organized a big celebration, not just to commemorate the years of togetherness, but to inaugurate something special: the Sterling Family Institute. It was a formal organization dedicated to reuniting separated families, offering free mediation, counseling, resources, all based on the family's experience and lessons learned. "This institute represents everything we have learned," Marcus explained during the opening ceremony. "That family is worth it, that reconciliation is possible, that love overcomes pride." The institute occupied a beautiful building downtown. It had mediation rooms, spaces for support groups, a library with resources on family dynamics, and a team of trained professionals, but always with the involvement of Arthur and Elizabeth. "We want every family that comes through here to know," Elizabeth said in her speech, "that they are not alone, that others have been through this and overcome it, that there is hope." The Institute started serving a few families a month. In 6 months it was dozens. In a year, hundreds. The impact was measurable: reunited families, restored relationships, transformed lives. One particularly touching story was of a father and son who had not spoken in 20 years. The son was gay, and the father, from a more conservative generation, did not accept it. They came to the Institute in desperation. The mother was ill and wanted to see the family united before she passed. The sessions were difficult. There were shouts, tears, moments when it seemed impossible. But Arthur and Elizabeth persisted. They shared their own story of separation. They showed they understood the pain on both sides. It took months, but slowly the walls began to fall. The father began to see his son not as a disappointment, but as a person. The son began to see his father not as an enemy, but as someone trapped in his own limitations. On the day they finally embraced, the entire Institute team cried together. "Thank you," the father said to Arthur and Elizabeth, "for not giving up on us, for showing us that love is more important than being right." "Thank you for having the courage to try," Elizabeth replied. "Many do not. Stories like these multiplied, each one unique, each with its own specific challenges, but all sharing the same fundamental need: connection, love, family." Ethan, now 17 years old, was a regular volunteer at the Institute. He had a special gift for talking to teenagers in conflict with their parents. "I get it," he would say. "Parents can be frustrating. They might not understand you. They might seem stuck in the past, but they love you. And one day you'll realize time goes by fast. Don't waste it on fights that don't matter." His honesty and authenticity resonated. Young people who were resistant to adults opened up to Ethan. He became the bridge so many families needed. "You have an incredible future ahead of you," Marcus said to his son one night. "College, career, whatever you want to do." "I know what I want to do," Ethan replied without hesitation. "I want to keep doing this, working with families, helping people reconnect. It's my passion." Marcus could not have been prouder. His son had found purpose so young, a beautiful, meaningful purpose that would make a difference in the world. But life, as always, had one more twist in store. It was on an ordinary afternoon, during a session at the Institute. Arthur was mediating a conversation between a mother and daughter, when suddenly he turned pale. He clutched his chest. He collapsed. Panic was immediate. Ambulance, hospital, doctors running, the whole family in the waiting room, reliving the nightmare of Elizabeth's surgery years before. "Please," Marcus prayed under his breath. "Not now. Not like this." Hours passed like centuries. Finally, a doctor came out. "Mr. Arthur had a heart attack," he announced. "We managed to stabilize him, but it was serious. He will need intensive care and a lot of rest." "Will he be okay?" Elizabeth asked, her voice trembling. "With proper care, yes, but he can no longer have the hectic life he had. You need to slow down significantly. Arthur was in the hospital for 2 weeks. When he came home, he was fragile, tired, a shadow of the vibrant man he used to be. "I'm old," he said one night to Marcus, the frustration evident. "My body is telling me I need to stop." "Then stop," Marcus replied gently. "You've already done more than most people do in 2 lifetimes. It's time to rest." "But there's still so much work, and we'll keep going," Marcus interrupted. "You built something incredible, Dad. The refuge, the institute, all these programs, but now it's our turn to carry the baton. Yours, mine, Julian's, Ethan's. You planted the seeds. Now let us water them." It was hard for Arthur to accept. He was used to being the pillar, the strong one, the provider. But his body didn't lie. He needed to slow down. Elizabeth also reduced her commitments to take care of her husband. The wisdom circles continued, but less frequently. She prioritized what mattered most, being there for Arthur. 45 years married, she said one afternoon, sitting beside him in the garden. "And I don't regret a single day." "Not even the hard days?" Arthur asked, a faint smile on his face. "Especially the hard days." Elizabeth held his hand. "They taught us. They strengthened us. They made us who we are." "Who are 2 tired old people, sir," Arthur joked. "We're survivors. Fighters, lovers," Elizabeth corrected, "and we still have stories to write." Arthur's recovery was slow but steady. He learned to accept limitations. He learned to delegate. He learned that strength also lies in knowing when to step back. And the family adjusted. Marcus took on more leadership responsibilities. Julian expanded his role. Ethan, even young, showed impressive maturity in how he helped manage several programs. Marina, who had always been more behind the scenes, also took on a more active role. She had experience in administration and brought the needed organization to the family's growing projects. "We're a team," she said during a family meeting, "each with our own gifts, each contributing in their own way. That's how we make this work, and it did work." The work continued. Families kept being helped. Lives kept being transformed. 8 years after that rainy night, Ethan graduated high school. It was a moment of great celebration. He had been accepted to several universities, all offering scholarships. "Where are you going?" his grandparents asked anxiously. "I'm staying here," Ethan announced, "at the local university, studying psychology and social work. Because I want to keep working at the institute. I want to be close to you all." "Ethan, you don't have to—" Marcus started. "I know," Ethan interrupted, "but I want to. This is my family. This is my work. This is my passion. Why would I go far away when everything I love is here?" Ethan's decision proved perfect. He studied during the day and worked at the institute at night and on weekends. His young perspective combined with formal training brought new ideas and energy. He created specific programs for young people, support groups for teenagers in family conflict, workshops on intergenerational communication, all modern, engaging, effective. "You're revolutionizing our work," Elizabeth said, proud, "taking everything we built and taking it to the next level." "I'm standing on the shoulders of giants," Ethan replied. "You did the hard work. I'm just adapting it for the new generation." Arthur, even with physical limitations, stayed involved. He became a consultative figure, offering wisdom, sharing experience, being the emotional anchor everyone needed. "My body may be slower," he joked, "but my mind is still sharp, and my heart still beats strong for our mission." It was during this period that Marcus received an unexpected recognition. He was named Social Entrepreneur of the Year, a prestigious award that recognized not just business success, but positive social impact. The award ceremony was grand, many important people, elaborate speeches. But when Marcus stepped onto the stage to accept, his speech was simple and straight from the heart. "This award isn't mine," he began. "It belongs to my family, specifically to my parents, Arthur and Elizabeth Sterling." He pointed to where they were seated. The two, now in their 70s, waved shyly at the audience. 8 years ago, I found my parents sitting on my front doorstep, in a torrential downpour, with nowhere to go. And in that moment, I had a choice. I could have walked right past them. I could have pretended I didn't see them. I could have gone back to my empty but comfortable life. The audience was completely silent. But I didn't do that. I stopped. I looked and I saw not just two helpless elderly people. I saw my parents. I saw everything they sacrificed for me. I saw the chance to finally be the son they should have had. Everything we've built since then, the refuge, the institute, the programs, the transformed lives, none of this would exist if not for that night, if not for parents who never stopped loving, even when they weren't loved back. Marcus paused, emotional. So this award is theirs. This award for teaching me that it's never too late to start over, that family is worth any sacrifice, that love always overcomes pride. The standing ovation was immediate and lasting. But the best moment came later, when Marcus returned to the table and hugged his parents. "I'm so proud of you," Arthur whispered, "of the man you've become." "I only became this because of you," Marcus replied. "You saved me more than I saved you." The award brought more visibility to the family's work. More donations, more volunteers, more families being helped. The circle of impact kept expanding. But for the family, the real prize was in the simple moments, in Sunday dinners, in mornings having coffee with the grandchildren, in conversations in the garden at sunset, in spontaneous hugs, in freely spoken "I love yous." "You know what surprises me most," Elizabeth said on one of those coffee mornings, "that we're happy, genuinely, deeply happy." "Why is that surprising?" Julian asked. "Because we've been through so much, lost so much, suffered so much," Elizabeth explained. "We could have come out of it bitter, broken, but we didn't. We came out stronger, more united, more capable of loving." "Suffering can do that," Arthur added. "It can break us or make us stronger. We chose to be strengthened. And we chose to use our pain to help others," Marcus finished, "to turn our story into hope for other families." It was a perfect morning. Soft sun, gentle breeze, a united family, a stark contrast to that rainy night years ago, but in a way connected to it. Because without that night, without that rain, without that moment of choice, none of this would exist. On the 10th anniversary of that transformative night, the family decided to do something special, a celebration not just for them, but for all the families who had been impacted over the years. They organized a big event in the city park. They called it the Family Festival. There would be music, food, activities for children, and most of all stories. Stories of reconciliation, of overcoming, of love triumphing. Hundreds of people came, families who had gone through the refuge, families who had been mediated at the Institute, people who had read the book or seen the documentary and were inspired to reconnect. The stage was set, and throughout the day, different people came up to share their stories. A 50-year-old man told how the book inspired him to seek out his father, whom he hadn't seen in 30 years. They reconciled, and now the father was right there beside him, smiling. A young woman shared how Elizabeth's wisdom circles helped her navigate a difficult divorce and rebuild her relationship with her mother. A couple told how the Institute saved their marriage when they were ready to give up. Story after story, tear after tear. But happy tears, tears of gratitude, of transformation, of hope fulfilled. When it was time for Arthur and Elizabeth to speak, the crowd quieted down. These were the pillars, the ones who started it all. Arthur, now 72, slowly climbed onto the stage, leaning on Elizabeth. But when he took the microphone, his voice was clear and strong. 10 years ago, my wife and I were sitting on a sidewalk in a torrential downpour. We had lost everything. Our home, our savings, our dignity. We thought we had reached the end. He paused, looking at the crowd. But it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a journey we never imagined. A journey that brought us here, today, looking at hundreds of you, families that were touched, transformed, reunited. Elizabeth took the microphone. If there is one thing we want you to take away today, it is this. It is never too late. Never too late to fix things, to forgive, to start over. We are living proof of that. And no matter how dark it seems, Arthur continued, no matter how much time has passed, no matter how much hurt exists, if there is a thread of love, no matter how small, it can be turned into a rope, into a bridge, into a connection. So go, Elizabeth encouraged. Go find that family member you haven't spoken to in years. Make that difficult phone call, write that letter, reach out, choose love over pride. Because in the end, Arthur concluded, his voice choked with emotion, in the end, all we have is family. All that remains is love. And it is worth fighting for, worth every tear, every hard conversation, every uncomfortable moment. The ovation was deafening. People stood up, they applauded, they cried, and more importantly, many grabbed their phones right there. They made calls, sent messages, started conversations they had been putting off for years. The festival continued into the night. When it finally ended, the Sterling family stayed behind to help clean up. It was their way, never above the work, always willing to do whatever was needed. This was a perfect day, Ethan said, picking up trash. Seeing all this impact, all these happy families, this is what we work for. And we'll keep working, Julian added. There are still so many families in need of help. There always will be, Marcus observed. But each one we help, each connection we facilitate is worth everything. When they returned home that night, exhausted but happy, Arthur asked everyone to gather in the living room for a moment. I want to say something, he began. Something I've been thinking about. Everyone sat down, attentive. Arthur rarely asked for formal attention like this. When Elizabeth and I were on the streets, lost and desperate, we used to say a prayer every night. His voice was heavy with emotion. We asked for one last chance, a chance to see our family reunited, to make peace with our children, to meet our grandchildren. Elizabeth took his hand, also moved. They didn't just give us that chance, Arthur continued. They gave us so much more. They gave us renewed purpose. They gave us the opportunity to turn our pain into something beautiful, into something that helps others. And now, looking at all of you. He looked around the room. Marcus, the son who became the most generous man I know. Julian, the son who never gave up on us. Ethan, the grandson who is our pride and joy. Marina, the daughter-in-law who welcomed us into her home and heart. Little Elvira, our granddaughter who brings so much light. Tears streamed freely down Arthur's face now. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for giving us more than we deserved. More than we asked for. More than we dreamed of. You turned our last years into the best of our lives. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Everyone stood up simultaneously and joined in a group hug, a family hug, of love, of a unity that nothing could break. We're the ones who thank you, Marcus said through tears, for never giving up, for coming that rainy night, for giving us the chance to be better. They stayed like that for long minutes, embracing, connected, a family that had been broken and was restored, stronger than ever. In the following years, life continued its natural flow. There were more challenges, more victories, more stories of transformation. Ethan graduated from university and took on a leadership role at the Institute. He brought technological innovations, creating an online platform where families could receive virtual mediation, thus expanding the reach across the entire country. Julian and Chloe had another child, a boy named Arthur, in honor of his grandfather. Little Arthur was the joy of his grandparents, always running through the garden, full of energy and life. The Eleanor Whitmore Refuge had expanded to 10 units in different cities, each one operating on the same principles of dignity and respect, each one making a difference in its community. The Sterling Family Institute had mediated over 1,000 family reconciliations, 1,000 stories of love overcoming pride, 1,000 families reunited. And Arthur and Elizabeth. They continued to be the heart of everything. Even with advanced ages, even with weaker bodies, their spirits remained strong. They were the inspiration, the living example that transformation is possible. It was on a quiet Sunday, 15 years after that rainy night, that Marcus had a deep conversation with his father. "Dad, sometimes I still feel guilty," he confessed, "for the 5 lost years, for the things we didn't do together, for the moments I wasted." Arthur looked at his son with tenderness. "Marcus, my son, guilt is a weight you don't need to carry," he said gently. "Those 5 years hurt, I won't lie. But they also taught us. They prepared us for what came after." "What do you mean? If we hadn't gone through that separation, that pain, would we have learned about forgiveness, about reconciliation?" Arthur explained. "Would we have the authority to help other families reconnect if we hadn't experienced it ourselves?" Marcus thought about his father's words. "So you're saying we needed to go through that?" "I'm saying nothing was wasted," Arthur corrected. "Every tear, every difficult night, every moment of pain, it all served to shape us, to prepare us to do what we do now. Even so, I wish I could go back and—" "We can't go back," Arthur interrupted firmly but with love. "We can only move forward. And look what we built by moving forward. Look at the lives we touched, the families we reunited, the love we multiplied." "You're right," Marcus finally smiled. "As always." "Not always," Arthur joked. "But after 75 years lived, I've accumulated some wisdom." Father and son laughed together, a moment of lightness and connection that Marcus would keep forever. As the years passed, it became clear that Arthur and Elizabeth were entering the final phase of their lives. No dramatic illness, just natural aging. They got more tired, slept more, moved more slowly. But their spirits remained vibrant. Until their last days, they continued to receive visitors. They continued to share wisdom. They continued to be beacons of hope for everyone around. It was on a spring afternoon, 20 years after that rainy night, that Arthur gathered the family once more. "I know my time is coming," he said without preamble. "Don't feel sorry. Don't be sad. I lived a full life. A good life." "Dad," Marcus began, but Arthur raised his hand. "Let me finish," he asked. "There's something I want everyone to know, something important." The family waited, hearts tight. "That rainy night 20 years ago was not an accident," Arthur confessed. "We chose to go there, on that specific day, at that specific time, because we knew you would get home from work, Marcus." Marcus was confused. "I don't understand." "We wanted to see you. We wanted you to see us," Elizabeth explained, joining the conversation. "After 5 years, we were desperate, not just for material help, but for connection, for you. So you waited on purpose." Marcus was processing. "We waited hoping you would stop, that you would see us," Arthur confirmed. "Not to ask for anything, but just to see you up close, to know you were okay." "And the rain. The rain was the universe being merciful." Elizabeth smiled through the tears. "It made us stay. It made you stop. It created the moment that changed everything." Marcus was stunned. All this time he thought it had been chance. But it wasn't. It was choice. It was love. It was parents desperate to see their son one last time. "Why did you never tell me this before?" "Because it didn't matter," Arthur said. "What mattered was that we reconnected, that we built something beautiful. How we got there was less important than where we ended up. But now, with my time running out, I wanted you to know." Arthur looked deeply into his son's eyes. "I wanted you to know that we never gave up on you, even in the darkest moments, even when it seemed impossible. Our love never diminished." Marcus hugged his father, crying openly. 20 years of journey. 20 years since that night. And he was still discovering new layers to the story. Arthur passed away peacefully 3 months later. He went to sleep one night and didn't wake up. Elizabeth was by his side, holding his hand, just as she always had been. The funeral was enormous. Hundreds of people, former students, Families from the refuge, people from the institute, everyone wanting to pay tribute to a man who made a difference in so many lives. But it was Ethan's speech that captured Arthur's essence. "My grandfather taught me that greatness isn't in how high we climb," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the tears. "It's in how many we lift with us." And he lifted many, including his own family, when we were broken. "He taught me that it's never too late to start over, that forgiveness is liberation, that love overcomes everything." Ethan paused, emotional. "And he taught me that a life well lived is one that touches other lives." "Grandpa, you touched so many lives, including mine, and I promise to continue your legacy, to keep helping families, to keep planting seeds of love." Ethan looked at the coffin. "Thank you for everything. Rest, knowing your work continues." Elizabeth lived another 2 years after Arthur. Those were difficult years. She missed her partner of 5 decades, but she found comfort in family, in her grandchildren, in the work that continued. "Your grandfather is here," she would often tell Ethan. "In every family we've reunited, in every life we've transformed, he is here." When Elizabeth also passed, it was as if an era had ended. But it didn't really end, because the legacy continued. Marcus, now in his 60s, took on the role of patriarch. He carried his parents' lessons, the wisdom, the commitment to family and community. Julian continued working with youth, now training a new generation of mentors. His own son, the young Arthur, was already showing interest in the family work. And Ethan? Ethan blossomed completely. Now in his mid-30s, he had become a national reference in family mediation. He wrote books, he gave lectures, he trained thousands of mediators. But his greatest pride was still the local work, at the institute, at the refuge, in the communities where it all began. 25 years after that rainy night, in a special ceremony, a statue was unveiled in the city park. It was of an elderly man and woman sitting together in the rain, Arthur and Elizabeth Sterling. The plaque read, "In memory of Arthur and Elizabeth Sterling, who taught us that it is in the storm that we discover who we truly are. That family is worth any sacrifice, that love always, always overcomes pride, that it is never too late to start over." At the unveiling ceremony, Marcus, now a grey-haired man, gave the final speech. 25 years ago, on a night like this, rainy and cold, I found my parents sitting on the sidewalk, and I had a choice. He began, his voice thick with emotion. A choice that changed everything. I chose to stop. I chose to see, I chose to love. And that choice didn't just save my parents. It saved me. It saved our family. And it allowed us to save hundreds of other families. This statue is not just a tribute to my parents, Marcus continued. It's a reminder that we all have choices, every day, in every moment. We can choose pride or love, separation or connection, bitterness or forgiveness. He looked at the gathered crowd. And these choices matter. These choices define who we are. They define the legacy we leave. So when you pass by this statue, remember, Marcus concluded, remember to make the right choice, the choice of love, the choice of family, the choice of connection. Because in the end, as my parents always said, all we have is love, and it's worth fighting for, always. The crowd applauded, cried, and more importantly, internalized the message. That night, when Marcus returned home, Ethan was waiting for him. "Dad, I just got a call," Ethan said, excited. "An international foundation wants to fund the expansion of our model to other countries. They saw the impact we've had and want to replicate it globally." Marcus sat down, processing the information. "Globally?" he repeated. "Yes. Europe, Asia, Latin America. They want to take the Sterling model to the world." Ethan was beaming. "Imagine, Dad, thousands of families around the world being reunited, using the principles that Grandma and Grandpa taught us." Marcus felt tears filling his eyes. 25 years ago he was lost, alone, living an empty life. And now? Now his family's work was about to impact the entire world. "They would be so proud," Marcus murmured. So incredibly proud. I know they are. Ethan placed his hand on his father's shoulder. Wherever they are, they're smiling, because the seed they planted keeps growing, keeps multiplying. Father and son stood there in comfortable silence, thinking of Arthur and Elizabeth, thinking of everything they had built together, thinking of the future that was still to come, because the story didn't end on that rainy night 25 years ago. That was just the beginning of a journey of transformation, of love, of legacy, and that legacy would continue, generation after generation, family after family, life after life, because in the end, that was what mattered. Not the money, not the fame, not the awards, but the lives touched, the hearts transformed. The families reunited. That was the legacy of Arthur and Elizabeth Sterling, and it was a legacy that would live on, growing, multiplying, forever. The end of the story. And now, tell us, what did you think of this story? Do you believe it's never too late to reconcile with family? Have you been through something similar? Share your experience in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional stories like this one. Your participation is very important to us.